If you were to make a list of the most interesting and lovable human beings on the face of the earth, and it didn't include Alex Banayan, you fucked up your list. He's one of the best human beings I've ever gotten the chance to know. And we decided to sit down and break the AMP podcast record for the length of time with the microphones in front of us. So we answer some questions that came in. We talk about a wide range of topics. So if you're interested in a long discussion between two friends about anything and everything, this is the podcast for you. Alex.
Dude, it's happening.
We're here.
Give the people the context of why we're doing this. Because this is preposterous.
Because you like doing preposterous things, and
Correct.
You knew that if we went over 2 hours at least, you would have the AMP record in the modern era for doing.
Because in the prehistoric AMP.
In the prehistoric AMP
there's a
era,
difference.
there's a long podcast with Rick Doblin where I'm like, this is pre all of the hoopla about psychedelic medicine, and we just like dove into all of the different science and research and like went back and forth at this conference. That was a very unique thing, but no other AMP has ever crossed the legendary 2-hour threshold.
My life is creating goals that mean nothing and just going for it. So I'm happy to add this to the belt of goals that mean nothing to anyone else other than us.
We should have a belt. We should have like a WWE style, like
I don't want to put
belt.
any expectations, but I would hope that I get a certificate in the mail signed by Aubrey. World's longest Aubrey Marcus podcast episode.
The thing is, you have a hard time figuring out time anyways, like I put an hourglass in front of you and asked you how much time was in the hourglass and you just, were like trying to count grains of sand, you didn't really
it's not my strength, but my friends like love to make fun of me about how my sense of time is really bad. Like I was, Elliot, right?
Yeah.
I told you about Elliot. I was like, pretty much they all make fun of me. I take like 40-minute showers. I feel like this is not necessary to be sharing. But anyways, yes, my sense of time has been skewed my whole life.
Well, you will have the longest officially. And if not, we will just tell you that it was, and you will feel the sense of satisfaction.
Give me a participation trophy. I don't care.
You don't need any of those fucking participation trophies because you've done some rad shit. Obviously, we talked a bunch about the third door. And you are like all over the country. You're sharing videos in languages I don't understand. With fucking, I don't even know why.
Did you see the Japanese one a couple days
I don't
ago?
even know why they're interviewing you. They're like interviewing you in Japanese,
Dude,
and then
so
somehow,
amazing.
like you have like a translator thing in your ear. Yeah, and someone's like.
So I have like a little earpiece where someone's, sort of whispering the English translations in real time. Yeah.
I thought it was gonna go full Japanese game show where you were gonna have to do some weird sex stuff in there, but no.
Did you
it's
see
just
like
a normal
the green
interview.
screen they put up?
Yeah.
It was crazy.
It was amazing.
It was.
You've
That
been
was in Osaka from 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
That's dope. All right. So one thing I want to get in, because after we did that podcast, you told one of the most epic stories, and if you guys haven't heard this yet, you got to go listen to the last podcast I did with Alex. One of the most epic stories where I didn't know you at all, but we'd been referred by enough people, so I did zero research this particular day, which is unusual for me. Usually like I do some research, but I was like, fuck, all right, podcast. And then you go, so then I decided I was going to go on The Price is Right, and I go, that's a bad idea.
I remember you saying that.
And then you tell like the most epic.
When you said that's a bad idea, I realized, oh shit, he doesn't know where I'm going with this.
No.
This is going to be great. This is going to be
And my
perfect.
mind was fucking blown. But then, so we're hanging out in Santa Monica and we're going to get some sushi.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I did another game show too. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about?
And you told me not to tell you because you wanted it on here.
That's it. So now I gotta hear game show number 2, the story.
This is, if the first game show showed that I was like sort of an idiot, this one shows I don't learn my lesson, but it still sort of works for me. So like to give like people context, for the first game show, pretty much I spent 7 years writing, the book I was dreaming of reading. I didn't have money because I was 18 years old at the time. So I went and hacked The Price is Right, used the money. I won a sailboat, sold the sailboat, and used the money to fund the book. And then like 6 years later, I'm getting to the end of the writing of the book. Dude, I swear to God, this is like preposterously true. Like, you can't make this shut up. So I'm just finishing the writing of the book, and it's like 8 months until book launch. And I'm realizing, like, shit, I've pretty much used like all my money
That
just to fund.
that sailboat money is not going to last forever.
Dude, 7 years is like a long time to sort of like, stretch out your budget. So like, I'm like, wow, I really could use some more money for this book launch. I'm like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I was like talking to my little sister, and she's like, oh yeah, there's this like new game show that they just created on the Game Show Network that isn't even out yet. And I think they're like filming it tomorrow for the final day. And I'm like, what? And I Google it, and she was right. In LA, there was this Game Show Network game, which I never heard of before because it wasn't even out yet. And it was filming for the final day the next morning at 6 a.m. It is 8 p.m. and I'm standing with my little sister, and I check online, and there's 3 tickets left. And I just book all 3 tickets, and they're like free tickets. I just like book all 3 tickets. It's filming the next day at 6 a.m. And I call 2 of my best friends, Kevin and Jojo. And I'm like, guys, what are you doing tomorrow morning? And they're like, oh, I'm not going to work. I'm like, great. Just tell work you'll be late. You'll be there at like 10 or 11 a.m. And they're like, okay, cool. So we show up the next morning, and pretty much dude, it was so funny. I never forget this. I like went home that night, and like I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and she's like, what are you doing? Because I was like on my phone at like 2 o'clock in the morning, like just researching. I'm like researching a game show.
But it hadn't even been out yet. So there's so much less research.
So that's what she said. She said, how are you researching it if it hasn't been out yet? I'm like, I'm just looking up who the producers are. Because my thinking was like, that was the key to The Price is Right. Figuring out who the undercover producers were, who the casting producers were. And my theory was, what if I sound like such a psycho right now. My theory was, what if I take the exact same strategy that worked with The Price is Right and did it on a show that is nothing like The Price is Right, but it's just another game show? Would the system work? So this was sort of like a test. And I literally show up the next morning, 6 a.m. with 2 of my best friends.
And what's the game show called?
It's called Win Sanity, and it's on the Game Show Network.
Okay, sounds about right.
And pretty much all I knew about the show is it was a trivia show where you can win a big prize. And it's hosted by Donald Faison from Scrubs. And like, I'm like, great. I love Donald Faison. This is going to be perfect. I show up the next morning, 6 a.m. And dude, I'm not kidding. I do the exact same strategy. I find the producer, find the undercover producer, befriend the audience. I am the first contestant to be called down, and I ended up sweeping the entire show, winning the entire grand prize, winning a car, selling the car, and that's how I funded the book launch.
But wait. Okay, so you dressed in a funky outfit.
Dressed in a funky outfit. Do you know what I realized though from The Price is Right? The funky outfit wasn't the key.
It was you. It was the extra personality, not the extra tie.
This is the thing that I realized about The Price is Right. Because when I went into The Price is Right, I sort of just tried everything and hoped something worked. Now in hindsight, I can know which parts actually made the difference. What they're looking for, because there's a casting producer who interviews everyone in the audience. What they're looking for is someone who's on even when they're not on. So pretty much what they want is, okay, so they bring the whole audience into this room before they go into the studio, and they're like, Aubrey, what do you do for a living? They talk to you for 10 seconds and they move on to the next person. That's where their like main interview is. Yeah. But they also have other producers watching you while you're not being interviewed to see who's the most energetic person when the spotlight isn't even on them. So everyone thinks it's a 10-second interview. It's actually a 1-hour interview.
There's like one-way glass everywhere. People looking at you all the time.
Bingo. Correct. So I knew that from The Price is Right, that people are watching you the whole time.
Which means that you had to do nothing because you're actually always on.
So dude, like when other people were like doing their interviews, I was like cheering. I'm like, you're the best. Like I was just I was going full out for an hour. And
And you got picked. All right. But now with The Price is Right, you didn't know the price of anything, and you managed to universally luck your way through this whole fucking thing that was this miraculous thing. This is a trivia show.
Which is much harder with like hard questions. Like how many parcels of mail does the U.S. Postal Service sort every hour? Impossible to know questions. So,
so you must be kind of like secretly undercover nasty at trivia because you won.
I'm like weird like that. Like I know like random shit. If I hear something random, I'll remember it. If I hear something not random, I'll forget it. Like, which U.S. president was known as like the Napoleon of the stump? James K. Polk. Like I know like random weird stuff.
Good one. That was a nice one. How many people, now listen, be honest with yourselves if you're listening, how many people knew that was James K. Polk? I would say not many.
Anyways, I don't know if it's something to be proud of.
That? Nope. You didn't know that? Sky? Nope. I didn't know that.
But this is the thing about The Price is Right. I realized that with The Price is Right, the reason I won was because the audience crowdsourced the answer.
Right.
I didn't have the answer, the audience did.
Right.
The reason I almost failed at The Price is Right was because I wasn't present enough to know to listen to them.
Yeah.
Until the end. This time, I know how it works. So I literally was like so calm on the stage, you know, when I got called up, and whenever they would ask me a question, and I've been like meditating for 5 years now, so I'm like really calm. So I'm like, audience, what do you think? And someone in the audience is like, I'm a postman, blah, 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 blah. And on the show, it's allowed. You're allowed to call out for answers.
Really?
So, but I was so calm. Normally people are like, what's the answer? And people are yelling. I was like so calm. I'm like, you work at the Post Service. Thank you so much. Boom. Next one. How many, accounts are there on Yahoo Mail? Someone's like, I work in tech. It's like 30 million or something like that.
Wow.
I'm like, great. And 10 for 10. And the way the show works is if you get like 9 for 10 or 8 for 10, you win like a cash prize. But if you do perfect 10 for 10 without a single mistake, you also win a brand new car. So I won the car, sold the car, and that's how I funded the book launch.
This is amazing.
So if anyone needs any quick cash, do not go to get a bank loan.
Or if anyone needs a sailboat, a car, a fucking golf cart, Alex will eventually get one and you might be able to buy it from him.
You know, the craziest thing is I've trained 3 other friends who have all gone on to The Price is Right and like won prizes.
No way.
Yeah, so
I feel like I couldn't even do that. Like even if I got like psyched out.
No, you could definitely.
I feel like I don't have the ability to fucking bring it like that.
Do you know what I realize is like people's biggest like issue when it comes to like the interview process with the producers is fear of embarrassment. And I have it too, dude. I don't want to be embarrassed, but what people forget is when you're being interviewed by the producer, that's not on TV. So you can be a lunatic, and then when you get on TV, you can be super calm and normal. That's
one of my good friends, Ted Decker, who's I consider one of my spiritual mentors. He recognizes how we have these prisons of our own embarrassment. That's like they're constantly surrounding us and constantly binding us and preventing us from doing the things that would be the most rad thing to do. So whenever he feels like he might be embarrassed by something, but it's not going to hurt anybody, like he does it, like he has to do it. So like if we're at a fancy restaurant or whatever and there's like some music playing in the background and it would be totally inappropriate to dance, he will stand up on his chair and start dancing. He's not a good dancer. This is not like Twitch, where he's like putting on a performance and people are going to form a circle and clap. They're going to look at him and go like, whoa, like what is that? Like he has to like do the thing to like exercise that part of him that's in the cage. It's
so funny. I like the phrase prison of your own embarrassment because really what that is, it's like, because what is embarrassment? It's fear of people, judging you, which is fear of people abandoning you, which is fear of suffering and dying alone. Like if you keep pulling back the layers, in my opinion. Like why is
I guess so, right? Like what other thing is? It's fear of being a social outcast.
And then what does that lead to? Isolation, suffering.
From an evolutionary biology standpoint,
it's the worst thing. You're cast out from the tribe because you're bad and broken.
You have a survival disadvantage. You have a mating disadvantage. You have all of these other things. So embarrassment is the emotion that comes to try to keep us...
to protect you from becoming an outcast who dies alone. No, I'm serious. Like, dude, why does anyone, whether it's a guy or a girl, get afraid to talk to the, opposite sex or something like that? Fear of that rejection, that embarrassment.
Yeah, but then it runs amok, and then it goes and it becomes counteractive because obviously you're overcoming your fear of embarrassment was what made you exceptional, which is what got you on the show, which is what got you the funding for the book, which is what got you the marketing for the book, which is what got you all these amazing stories, which is what gets you, I'm sure, so many, you're so fucking endearing because we all feel this, it's like this thing that had a purpose that overstayed its purpose. It's like long past.
Dude, there's so many things in life that overstate their purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And this is like one of those huge ones.
And they had a purpose in the beginning.
They did have a purpose in the beginning.
I know. And the thing about me is like, if you ask my sisters, I have 2 sisters, like what it was like growing up with me, they would tell you I was the most scared kid you'd ever meet. I'm dead serious. Like I had a nightlight on until I was 12. I hated scary movies. I never went on roller coasters. So, and when I started writing The Third Door, I was completely paralyzed by fear. So a lot of this journey on the outside, I think every journey has sort of 2 journeys going on at the same time, the outer one and the inner one. The outer journey is like, I'm trying to track down Bill Gates and interview him and all the challenges that has. But the harder journey was the internal one.
Always is.
Going from terrified of failure, terrified of being embarrassed, mortified of making mistakes, and essentially being paralyzed to the point where I gave it a name. It was called the flinch. Yeah. Where any time I faced anything of even remote desire that I wanted, I would completely freeze up. My mouth would wire shut. My legs would turn to stone. And what's crazy is if you hear this Price is Right or game show story, it doesn't make sense. If I feel the flinch so intensely, how am I doing these things? And I think the whole journey of The Third Door was me learning how to do them with still having the flinch.
Well, that's what courage is.
Killing it.
It's not feeling the flinch. That's like that's like being a psychopath. Like the guy in the Free Solo is the friend is the most.
I don't know. That's not. He has something different.
Right.
I don't relate to that actually.
Yeah. No. So it's not I
admire
he's an amazing human being, and this takes nothing away from him. But they actually do the brain studies, and they're like, yeah, you got something going on with your amygdala. You're actually don't feel fear. So he's an exceptional fucking human, and I'm sure the risk quotient of what he actually has to do actually probably does get him to feel some sense of something. But courage is not feeling fear. Courage is acting even though you're afraid. That's what fucking courage is. And that's what I think one of the highest virtues is. It's not the person who can do something all casually because it's no big deal. It's the person who does something even though it's fucking scary.
100%. And I think the thing that people misjudge about courage, and I'm very passionate about this, is, they'll look at you and they'll be like, oh, Aubrey is so courageous, so brave. And when they think about courage or any kind of mental asset, people assume that it's either something you're born with or you're not. But when they look at, someone who's really strong, they know, well, that person's been going to the gym for a long time. Society has accepted that, your muscle mass is something that can 100% be worked on. But your mental assets are either there or they're not there. And what I've seen, and I don't even know 100% of your life story. I know enough, though, to know that, dude, there have been moments in your career, like the time where, what was the Indy 500 story?
The Kentucky Derby.
The Kentucky Derby story. There's been moments in your life where you had to literally bench press your fear.
Yeah.
Or even bench press your life priorities. Mm-hmm. And first you were doing 50 pounds and now you can do 200 pounds and people are like, oh, he was able to do 200 pounds his whole life. But you actually worked your way up just like someone would in the gym bench pressing.
Absolutely. An easy way to figure that out is your fear of, and this is what I talk about in my book so much, your fear of a cold plunge. Right? There's only physiological benefits to cold water submersion. Only.
I can do 2 seconds.
There's only, right?
I'm not kidding. I'm not
kidding.
And
at the start, even when I was writing the book, it was every once in a while I had to fucking psych myself up and I'd play the 300 soundtrack and I'd have somebody watching me so that I felt like I was oh my God. It was like a giant production, It was here, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this cold plunge. It's wow, you're going to do the cold plunge. I was yeah, And I had to use my ego. I had to use all of these tools. I had to pound my chest to get fired up. And then eventually, it's not that my body doesn't feel the cold the same way. You know, it's like Wim Hof said, cold is an emotion. It's just, I know that like, yeah, all right, this is going to be uncomfortable. Now I just quietly slip in, and whether somebody asks me whether I did or not, it doesn't fucking matter, right? Like you get used to moving forward in spite of your resistance towards it.
I think that word that you just used is the key. You get used to.
Yeah.
And I think the key to like practicing courage from even doing small decisions that scare you and building up over years is you get comfortable with the fear. The fear doesn't go away.
Yep.
I wouldn't even say comfortable. You get more comfortable because it never becomes fully comfortable.
Right.
But you get more like, I don't even have to go into the details, but I had a very scary family situation this year. And me and my older sister realized some members of the family were petrified, whereas me and my sister were really scared. But it was the same situation. We realized, because for me and my sister, this isn't our first rodeo with stuff like this. Mm-hmm. We know it's going to be torture and pain for a few months. And then we also trust ourselves enough to be able to heal and grow. And I think the first time you do anything is the hardest one.
Yeah. And then the more reps you get, the easier it is. And then it's also not linear, right? It's not like every single time.
Dude, I wish it was linear.
Right? Like
that's what frustrates me.
It's not like linear. Every single time I go to the cold. Like sometimes I just look at it and I go like, damn, I just really don't want to get in there today. And sometimes it even wins. Sometimes the cold plunge wins. I walk over there with my towel and my chest freezer and I feel it with my hand and I'm like, nope, fuck it. Like you win today.
This is an aspect I don't like to admit. Mm-hmm. Like I still struggle with the fact that emotional evolution is not linear.
Yep.
It's a thing that like a part of me wants it to be like, well, every time I do something courageous, next time I'll be better. No, it's sometimes like 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah. 100%.
And I don't like that.
Yeah.
I haven't accepted it. I haven't come to peace with it.
Of course, we like things that are like you add one pebble to the pile of stones, and then the pile of stones is bigger. Like we like things that are like that, and that you can consistently get better. I think that's one of the
and you can rely on that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's so like maddening and also intoxicating about golf, because like you can go out and think you're better at golf, and then you'll go out and play, and you'll be like, I can't even hit the golf ball anywhere today, which is like unusual. Like other sports,
do you play
typically,
golf a lot?
No, I don't play golf too much, but it is one of those weird things where you have to look from the perspective. You have to widen the lens of perspective way out and say, I'm better 3 years from now than I was 3 years ago. Not necessarily 3 times ago, because I might go out there and like have some weird tick in my head, or like, and I'm just not able to hit it at all.
That's a good analogy for all things in life.
And that's on the physical side, and I think it's probably because golf is such a mental sport, but anything involving the mindset, it's always like up and down. And sometimes you'll get the courage and it'll be easy. And sometimes it just won't be there. I mean, because you have, sometimes
you surprise yourself that you did better than you expected to.
Oh, totally.
So it goes both ways.
Totally. You're like, damn, I had a lot.
And I think that's the difference between, I think a lot of people are like, well, what's the difference between like confidence and self-confidence? And to me, self-confidence is when you've proven to yourself what your abilities are. And confidence is a more external validation, which I actually think both are important. I'm not like, I hate external I like external validation,
Yeah.
But the self-confidence is like that deep well of like when shit's going really bad, you can close your eyes and be like, I've done things like this before.
All right, I got to talk to you about this because this is really fucking interesting to me. So Larry King is one of he's one of the big names that you could potentially get for this book, Third Door. You wanted him bad.
Yeah.
You wanted him bad. And when you want something bad, there's a lot of opportunity for fear to creep in, because the stronger you want something, the more afraid you are of it not working out, right? But at the same time, there's nothing to lose from trying. So there's that thing. It's like the most pretty girl that you see. Like that's the hardest one to talk to in a lot of ways, even though like you got, if you don't, she just goes away, you got zero chance, but there's maybe something wrapped up in the rejection or something like that. So tell us what happens when you see Larry King in a grocery store?
So this is like by far the most like preposterous of the, interview processes for this 7 years. So pretty much the third door was the 7-year journey. And a little context is I went out to go write this book I was dreaming of reading, to go find out how the world's most successful people, when they were just starting out, when no one was taking their calls, no one was taking their meetings, how did they find a way to break through? How did Bill Gates sell his first piece of software out of his dorm room when nobody knew his name, right? And I very naively thought, like, I was 18. I was like, how hard could this be? And that's sort of what set off this journey. And the answer is it could be very, very hard to try to convince Bill Gates to sit down with an 18-year-old with no credibility. And halfway through the journey, I had a disastrous situation with Warren Buffett. Like, it was a train. I pretty much spent 8 months tracking down Warren Buffett. I ended up hacking his shareholders meeting, but it sort of blew up in my face. And that's the context. That's the setup for this Larry King situation. That's the context. I pretty much have this disastrous situation with Warren Buffett, and I'm at the lowest point of my journey. When you spend like 2 weeks in bed, sort of with the covers over your head?
Yeah.
And for me, if there's one theme of this book, it's that at my lowest points, it's my best friends who pull me back up. And I have this best friend, his name is Corwin, and he's like, dude, you got to get out of, after 2 weeks, that's sort of when your friends start like, banging on the door, like, you got to get out of bed. And he's like, let's go like grab some lunch. We go to like a grocery store nearby, and we're literally grab sandwiches, and we're like sitting on the sidewalk watching cars go by. And, we're eating our sandwiches, and he's like, he's trying to pump me up. He's like, dude, like, don't you have any other interviews lined up? I'm like, I'm really pissy. I'm like, dude, I got nothing. And, I'm just being
just wallowing in it.
Right.
Like a dog that finds something stinky in the grass and he just wants to roll around.
Right. And
roll around in that thing.
I had just like literally dropped out of college to pursue this. I spent 8 months chasing war. I was just like in my lowest, I was, wallowing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got nothing. And he's like, trying to boost me. And he's like, come on, let's say you had an interview lined up. Like, who would you want to interview? Like, he's such a nice friend. I'm like, dude, even if I had an interview, I'd probably mess that up too. Look what happened with Buffett. And Corn's like, look, man, you can't be so hard on yourself. Interviewing isn't a science. It's an art. And as we're talking about this, the single most miraculous moment of my entire life happens. A car pulls up, parks right in front of me, tinted windows. The door swings open, and out walks Larry King. Now, again, if you're anything like me, when things line up so perfectly, that's when I get the most scared. And, that's where the flinch comes in. My mouth is wired shut. I'm, full shutdown mode. And I literally watch Larry King walk right past me, right into the grocery store sliding doors, and I don't say a thing. My friend Corin, jabs his elbow into me. He's like, dude, why didn't you say anything? Because he knew like how much I wanted it. I'm like, and this is the thing about fear. Fear is very good at making logical excuses.
Always.
Fear is very good at making logical excuses. And I was like, my flinch was making up excuses. I was like, look, he's probably, grabbing something for his family. I don't want to bother him. I don't want to be that guy. And Corin's like, dude, you are that guy. And then, my fear keeps making more excuses. I'm like, dude, he's probably like deep in the grocery store now. Like, there's no way I'll be able to find him. And Corin's like, dude, he's 80 years old. How far could he get? So I'm like, very reluctant, but, I decided to stand up and, go find Larry King. So I walk into this grocery store. I walk into the bakery.
What's that moment like though? Like, what's the moment where you stand up and decide to do it? Is there because that's an interesting thing. That's an interesting thing.
I would say at different times in my life, it was different things. In that moment, it was embarrassment of Corin judging me.
Yeah.
And I would say that's what's cool is
that's a good fucking friend.
I've never thought about this. These are the moments where who your friends are really determine your fate.
Right.
Because dude, if I had a kind of friend that would have judged me for talking to Larry King,
right,
I would have probably not talked to Larry King.
Right.
Because I would have been afraid of my friend judging me.
Or a friend who wasn't really, I wrote about friends in my newsletter like last week, or a friend who wasn't really hoping for you to win.
Right.
You know?
Right. Subconsciously Corwin, like deep in his heart, he's just such a true person. He was mad that I wasn't winning, you know?
Right. As any good friend is, you know?
Dude, that's why this is like where like the macro ROI, I even hate using that word, but like the ROI of like choosing real friends comes in. At least in a business sense, obviously in a personal sense.
So you just felt that kind of thing, like, oh,
well, he was judging me, man. He literally jabbed me with his elbow.
He's like, you got to get up and do this. And like, fucking fine. All right, got to get up and do this.
Right.
And then so you're up. And then you're like,
I'm not even, I'm like wallowing. I'm like dragging my feet, you know?
And you're kind of probably thinking like, I'll just go in there. I'll make a show of it.
So I can tell Corin I did it.
Yeah.
No, 100%.
But somewhere along the lines, you must have found your own courage.
So what happened, it wasn't even courage. It was like almost like fear. So I like walk in, I look at the grocery, I'm in the bakery section, no Larry. And then I'm like, okay, let me like at least check one other area. So I like walk to the produce section, fruits, vegetables, no Larry. And then right then I realized he had parked in the loading zone. So he's leaving like any second now. So that's when I guess my fear of like failure again, just like shot this adrenaline inside of me. And I'm like, I'm not messing this up again. So now I have this like bolt of adrenaline and I literally start running through this grocery store down the back of the store so I could look down each aisle, and I'm sprinting down, looking down each aisle, no Larry, no Larry, no Larry, no Larry, no Larry, no Larry. And I'm like frozen food section. So I'm like cutting a corner, like dodging old ladies, sprinting down the frozen food section, no Larry. And I realize he has to be at the checkout counter. So I run to the front of the store, look down each one, no Larry, no Larry, no Larry, no Larry.
No Larry.
No Larry. And at this point, I wanted to kick myself because he had literally been right in front of me.
Yeah.
And I hadn't said a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm literally looking down at my feet, walking out of this grocery store's parking lot. And, I slowly lift my gaze, and right there, 20 feet ahead of me is Larry King, suspenders and all. And I don't know what got into me, but it was almost this like, I think it was just all this like frustration and, resentment and anger from the whole journey. Almost like a volcano like erupting inside of me uncontrollably. I just yelled at the top of my lungs, Mr. King! And dude, the echo in the parking lot was so loud. The poor guy has had quadruple bypass surgery. He's 80 years old. I will, for the rest of my life, always remember him literally like jumping in the air. I like have to show you this. He literally turns around like this, like, literally all his wrinkles sprung back, looking like he's looking at the Grim Reaper. He's like mortified. He's had quadruple bypass surgery. And I'm like, oh God, this is a disaster already. But I'm like, all right, I'm like too deep in the game to like pull back now. So I sort of like run over to him and I'm like, Mr. King, my name's Alex. I'm 20 years old. I've always wanted to say hi. And he goes, okay, hi. And he walks the other way. So now I'm like, oh God. And I'm just like, at this point now, like awkwardly following him in silence. Like he's looking over his shoulder, but it's like silence though. I'm not saying anything. He's not saying anything. And he's like just walking towards his car. And he finally gets to his car, stuffs his groceries in the trunk, opens the driver's side door. And I go, wait. Can I go to breakfast with you? And he looks at me like I'm a lunatic. And before he can respond, he looks onto the sidewalk and sees that there's like a dozen people now watching this go down. So I guess like maybe out of like, social pressure, he just sort of like looked at me and was like, okay. I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, I love you. This is amazing. Like, I think he loves me. Like, and he like gets into his car. I'm like, great, I'll see you tomorrow. And he's like about to close the door. I'm like, wait, Mr. King, what time? And he just looks at me and like slams the door shut. And I'm like, okay, maybe he didn't hear me. So I'm like now yelling like, Mr. King, what time? And he just looks at me and starts the engine. I am now standing in front of his windshield waving my arms. Like, you know, those like gas station, like blimps. Like I'm waving my arms like a crazy person. And I'm like, Mr. King, what time? And he just looks at me and he's like, 9 o'clock. And, you know, speeds off. So I show up the next morning at 9 o'clock.
Wait, so how did he know which place, though?
I was 90% sure. I wasn't sure at the time, but I like Googled. I knew he like owned a restaurant in town. So
that was his breakfast
I
spot.
was like 90% sure that was it.
Yeah.
And I was right. I showed up the next morning there at 9 o'clock, and there he was, corner booth with his best friends.
The fucking interesting thing is that it was social pressure that got most of this situation done, right? Like this same thing, this same prison of embarrassment thing that we were talking about.
Ways. Isn't that funny that even like the most famous broadcaster on earth still like doesn't want to look bad in front of like...
Yeah, because then he might have 12 people who tweet something that go like, there was this really sweet kid who just wanted to have breakfast with Larry King and he just fucking didn't give him the time of day.
I think he's just a nice person too.
Yeah.
But it is funny how it works both ways.
Definitely did. Like, and you creating the crowd. I mean, he probably without the crowd, he probably
I didn't try to create the crowd.
As nice as he is, he probably wouldn't have done it without the crowd. Right. Yeah. So like, and it was also your exuberance, like one of your superpowers, your exuberance, which created the crowd. You know,
that's so funny.
And then the crowd created the environment, and then your persistence, which was partly probably endearing and partly also, you know, the social pressure and like craziness of it, that like it created this whole masterpiece of like that gets done. I don't know if did you see Avengers Endgame? You see that movie? Yet. There's like where Doctor Strange is like they're talking about the chances of them winning, and he's like 1 in a million. 1 in a million.
That's still a chance, though.
Because he can calculate. You're right.
That's
and
still
that's
a
like,
chance, yeah.
He's like, because he's calculated
I'm like the guy
odds.
from Dumb and Dumber who's like, so you're telling me there's a chance.
Yeah, exactly. But that's like,
right.
That situation is like the 1 in a million way that gets done. And the fucking inspiring thing about this is that there's always that outcome. There's that way, no matter who it is, no matter what's happening, there's the 1 in a million way that this might actually happen. And you won't know that, you know, and like in the Avengers movie, they didn't know that. And I won't spoil it, even though you should have fucking watched it by now if you're going to watch it. But like, you don't know exactly how that's going to be. But if you're like just there ready and willing to do crazy, bold things, maybe you're going to hit that one.
The way I can guarantee you have a 0% chance is not even trying.
That's a 0. You've locked in 0. Yeah.
So anyways, I show up the next morning, right? It's 9 a.m. I walk into you're sort of like my therapist. I'll tell you like a preposterous story. And you're like, let me tell you why that worked out. And let me tell you why it didn't work. Yeah, I'm like, thanks, Aubrey. And you're like, Alex, I need you to work on this over the next week. Come back next week after you've, really approached your fear of failure and embarrassment.
So there you are.
Okay, so I show up the next morning at 9 a.m. And there he is, corner table with his best friends. And there was an open seat at the table. But I had reflected the night prior about how I had acted the day before. And I thought maybe I should be a bit more gentle. So, I walk up and I'm like, novel idea, right? So I like go up and I'm like, hey, good morning, Mr. King. And he just sort of like looks up at me and is like, he just sort of like mumbles and waves me away. Right. And I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe he needs like a few minutes with his friends before he's ready. So there's a table next to him with, open chairs. So I sit at the table next to him waiting for him to call me over. 10 minutes goes by. 30 minutes goes by. An hour passes. And then finally he stands up and starts walking toward me. And dude, I can like feel my cheeks lifting.
Yeah.
And he walks right past me and heads for the exit. And
then you go, Mr. King.
At this point, after an hour of like sitting and wait, you're sort of like really down on yourself. And I sort of just like put a hand up in the air and I was like, Mr. Mr. King? And he's like, what is it, kid? What do you want? And at that point, I felt a very sharp, familiar pain in my chest.
Right.
And I just looked at him and I was like, honestly, I just wanted some advice on how to interview people. And this slow smile spreads across his face, almost as if to say, why didn't you say so? And he ends up like putting a hand on my shoulder and giving me the greatest monologue of interviewing advice I'd ever heard. And then he looks up to the ceiling as if he's like debating something in his mind. And then he locks his eyes back with mine and he goes, all right, kid, tomorrow, 8:45, see you here. And I show up like the next morning at 8:45. He calls me over to his table. He asked me why I even wanted to interview people. And I tell him about the book and he goes, all right, I'm in. And over the course of the past 5 years, we've had breakfast together over 50 times.
Wow.
So that definitely wins for like the craziest way the interview came together. But what's funny is like as great as that interview with Larry King was, and as much as the advice he gave me did change my life, I've realized on this journey, it's sometimes my journeys to get to these people, like the quest to get to them that teaches me the most. Mm-hmm. And with this Larry King situation, it completely changed my understanding of persistence. So if there's like one thing this journey gave me in addition to like a lot of lessons and a lot of failures was many, many years in therapy. And one thing I've learned in therapy over the years is that there's implicit and explicit messages in life. Okay, so think of your childhood, right? Your explicit message from me. My mom would explicitly say like, eat your vegetables. That was the explicit message of my childhood. The implicit message was me seeing my mom at, 2:00 in the morning eating ice cream in bed. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And it's the implicit messages in your childhood that have the strongest hold on you. It's the implicit messages that have the strongest hold on you.
Yeah, because we can sense through those words. It's like when your dad's like, oh, I love you, son. And then you like don't score enough points in your basketball game and you feel nothing
and he doesn't look at you or talk to you.
Nothing but judgment and contempt. And you're like, oh,
I win his love by being good at basketball.
And so implicitly you're like, implicitly, instead of it being I love you, which should be true and always true, it's I love you if you
make me proud
of you, versus which is making me proud of myself. You don't understand all that shit, but you understand that
you know how to survive.
To be loved, I gotta kick ass in this XYZ capacity, and that's the implicit. Whereas the explicit is like, no, I love you always, son. It's like, well, what about that time I fucking missed every shot I took? Didn't really feel like a lot of love.
He didn't talk to me for 2 days.
Yeah, it didn't feel like a lot of love then, Dad.
And I think what happens when we grow older and become adults is we never have time to really go into untangling those implicit messages that have such a strong hold on us.
No doubt.
And even in business, man, like the CEO is like, I love innovation. That's the explicit message. I love innovation is the explicit message. But the second someone takes a risk and messes up and gets fired, what's the implicit message?
Yeah.
So,
or I want people to be able to voice their opinion, and then someone voices their opinion and they get shit on.
Right. Congratulations. Like, no one will ever voice their opinion again,
yeah,
no matter how much time you tell them to.
Exactly.
And what I realize is like, if you look at, childhoods, especially in America, especially around persistence, the explicit message in America is try and try again. That's like the motto of America. But what's the implicit message? Let's say you want to be on the baseball team in, middle school and you like try out and you don't make it. Maybe if you're brave, you try out a second time and you still don't make it. And let's say you're crazy enough to try out a third time. If you still don't make it, what do the people who love you the most tell you? Your mom, your best friend.
Give it up. Let it go.
Yeah, maybe you should try basketball.
Yeah.
Maybe track is your sport,
Right.
And the implicit message is you get one shot, maybe two. After the third, you got to pack up and find somewhere else. And if there's one thing I learned from that Larry King experience, is that you have as many at-bats as you're willing to give yourself. You have as many at-bats as you're willing to give yourself. And that's changed my life. That's changed my approach to business. And it's completely stayed with me ever since.
What's interesting then is then understanding like when you're actually decreasing the likelihood by over persistence.
Well, that's a whole nother nuance,
right?
there.
So like that's something that you have to realize. Like sometimes your at bat might be doing nothing. Like let's say you really like a girl or really like a guy, right? And you've like laid it out. And like there's a certain point where laying it out is just going to cause them to be like, stop fucking talking to me. But you chill, you just be yourself, you go on with your life, you give a little space, you know, you kind of lightly interact wherever you like run into this person, or maybe it's in a friend group or whatever. That might actually be your at bat, you know? So like you do have to have some sense of, there's that persistence of, but then there's also the shift of strategy.
Well, the question is, how do you then execute on the persistence in a sense that doesn't backfire?
Right. So
because both are true. They actually coexist. They don't contradict. They coexist.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned about the over persistence, which is first of all, no business book talks about the dangers of over persistence. No business book talks about the dangers of over persistence. And with me, you know, I mentioned briefly the Warren Buffett situation. I had contacted him so many times over 8 months, you know, letters literally over and over and over again sent to his house and his office, calling his assistant every week, that even though I didn't get the final interview, I ended up interviewing Bill Gates after 2 years. It took 2 years to get to Gates. And the interview with Bill Gates went so well that his office was like, look, we love this. How can we help? And I was like, dude, when you have Bill Gates' office saying, how can we help? Yeah. You're taking out a very long list of requests. I'm like, well, if you're asking. And I made all my asks. And of course, the one that they said was the easiest one is Warren Buffett, because Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are best friends. So they're like, oh, Warren, that's easy. And I'll never know exactly what happened. But Bill Gates' office reached out to Buffett's office on my behalf. And Buffett's office responded back, and I got a message from Bill Gates' chief of staff saying, please do not contact Warren's office again. Thank you. And what I learned from that is that you can be so persistent in the wrong way that you can completely blacklist yourself.
Yep.
And you can dig yourself into such a deep hole that even Bill Gates can't pull you out of.
Yep. Yeah, that's the interesting thing. It's like, it's that intention and surrender kind of, it's the balance between like my never giving up on your intention, but like surrendering to the greater will of and mind of the world and everything conspiring in your advantage to make it happen. Like your intention was so strong to get that Warren Buffett. You're just, I'm trying, but you didn't have the balance of surrender. Like, you know what? All right, well, I gave it a shot this way. One way or another, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And like, I trust that.
But you can't trust it when you don't know what's going on.
It's hard.
And that's why a lot of people who are just starting out mess up, because you're figuring it out, which is okay.
Totally.
When a baby learns how to walk, they're falling 95% of the time.
Totally.
But they still learn how to walk.
But that's the path to like what we're talking about is a path to mastery, right? So the path to mastery is like how you combine that persistence.
Falling down and learning from it. As opposed to falling down and resenting.
Right. Yeah, it's that's a really interesting thing, because most of us don't even take the first step to even reach out and try. We think like, who am I? I'll never get this happen. Like you'd gone past that moment, right? But then there's your mastery moment would have been like, all right, I catch his vibes. Like this is the point where more is less, you know, I'll chill. And then some way or another this is going to work, which would have been the Bill Gates thing.
But I would have had to trusted the journey and trusted God.
Yeah, right.
I was not there yet, bro.
I get it. I'm not saying this to be critical.
I would say that's probably like the final lesson I learned, even after the book has come. It's something I'm literally doing right now in my life, is learning to trust.
I'm still learning to trust. I think we're all learning to trust. No matter how many times you've been successful, shit gets a little squirrely and you're like, this is the one.
Right. And especially
this is the one that's going to fucking take me out. I know it.
Especially, at least for me, I don't know about you, but for me, if you grew up in a continuous state of fear, and I definitely wasn't conscious of it at the time. What I've realized, I was thinking about this morning, is like, if you ask like a fish, you know, swimming in the water, you know, like, how's the water? You know, there's a famous thing. The fish would say like, what's water? And if you ask like a child who's just like living or being raised in a state of fear, you ask like, are you afraid? They would say, what's being afraid? Because they just know how they, you know, they don't know what they're in until you grow older and have that side by side.
Right.
And I was raised in a continuous state of fear. And again, I grew up with also a lot of love and all that stuff. But when you have parents who are immigrants and refugees who literally, my parents fled Iran because they would have died if they stayed there. Mm-hmm. My family's Jewish and they would have, you know, literally been persecuted. My grandpa was taken to a death camp and escaped and, you know, made it to America. Pretty much every decision you do is based out of fear.
Yep.
But as a kid, I didn't know that. For a kid, I thought this is just the right way to live, you know? So I agree with you. I completely agree with you.
I think there's some questions on fear that I got. All right, so check this out. This is one question. So we'll because we're talking so much about fear. This question is from Aaron Lemma.
What's up, Aaron?
What's
Lemma?
up, Aaron?
My good friend, Aaron.
At Lemon, that's like an NQ thing, right? You know him. You love him.
Yeah. He's Aaron the Lemma. Best, man. I love NQ.
He is the best. Absolutely one of the best humans ever. All right, he says, many believe that having an understanding and even a fear of death can ignite a sense of urgency, leading you to live a more fulfilling life. To what extent is fearing death a good thing? And when does it get in the way?
I know how I feel about it, but I want to hear how you feel about that. Because I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about death.
Yeah, you can go first, and then I'll jump in and give my understanding.
I wish I could be saying that I learned about death from like reading a book. But my first real experience with it was when my dad got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And that was about 3 years ago. And the thing about pancreatic cancer is it's sort of this like double-edged sword. Well, it's actually not double-edged. It's like 10 times the edge, because it's just, on the one hand, even if you catch it early, there's a 10% chance of survival. And that's if you catch it early. And if you don't do surgery on it, it's pretty much a 0% chance. And the flip side of that, again, and I hate saying there's a flip side because there's no flip side to something like that, but what it does give you is you're not wasting your final time with someone you love just hoping and hoping. You sort of, it forces some acceptance into,
right,
well, this is the last Thanksgiving. I'm going to really be here, as opposed to like disassociating and hoping it's not the last. So my dad, from time of diagnosis to the time he passes, 14 months. And it was, really tight family. So I was with him, every step of the way. And you can read books, you can talk to people, but no one can really explain what it's like to be standing at your dad's bedside, or anyone you love's bedside, when they take their final breath. And it's been 2 years now, and it's still very hard for me to explain how it felt. There's the obvious heartbreak. What's crazy is a lot of the heartbreak happened in the year of the cancer fight, and then obviously in the 2 years since he's passed. But the heartbreak wasn't in that. There's like it's like very hard to, I wish I had the words to explain it, but like on that final day for him, you almost don't, heartbreak is about me. And that day wasn't about me. It was my dad's time. And what I did feel, and this is like a weird way to put it, but I almost like saw the end of my own movie. I'm like, oh, that's everyone in this room. My mom was there, my sisters there. That's going to happen to all of us. And not in a scary way, but in like this is how the story ends for everyone. If you're lucky, you have people who love you standing in the room with you saying goodbye. And I think what's interesting about that question is it said, what's your fear of death? And what I couldn't have expected was, look, I don't like it, I don't enjoy, obviously, people I love passing away. But my fear of death, I felt in the year leading up to my dad's passing. But when he was passing, it gave me an acceptance of death. And I would say moving forward with my life, as much as the grief is still hard, I still think about him every day and it's still really hard. I wouldn't say there's a fear of death fueling me. There's an acceptance of death that helps me see my life more clearly. And the way it's impacted me on a day-to-day basis is I realize, I know this sounds like silly, but like, I don't know why. I guess I like grew up in America and I thought like, if you're successful, if you're rich, like you die and get an award. Or when my dad passed, God doesn't come down in the final moments and give you a report card of like, you were kind, Aubrey, or you were correct. No, everyone dies the same way. There's this quote that I love that says on the chessboard, even, the king and the queen and the bishop and the pawn, they
all go in the same box.
They all go in the same box. And that was sort of, wow, I've never thought about this, but that was sort of one of the things that I realized. I was like, and what comes with that is a liberation. Because I think so much of my life, even if you think about the third door, it's like me like yearning to achieve a place of good, being good, being, success, learning how to be successful. And what I learned from my dad's death is like, it doesn't matter in like a God sense. Again, I'm sure everyone has different beliefs, but I think God loves everyone equally, or the universe treats everyone,
Yeah.
And what that does is it liberates you to actually do what you want, not do it because you're going to get a report card at the end.
Yeah, I think that's so huge. I talked about this in a speech I gave where I was fresh off coming from Buenos Aires, and there's this big cemetery there called the Recoleta Mausoleum there, and they have all of these statues of people, and in the statues they have people. It's basically like their in memoriam report card, which is a statue of them, like they're a general, and they have like all their medals on their statue, and then they have all of these angels like worshiping them, like, wow, you did so good in this life, like, you did God's work and slayed all these people, or whatever the idea of the time was, about what made you have a life worth living. And then you look back to antiquity and everybody's so concerned with legacy and the passing of your name and like, will you be remembered? Like, none of that stuff really matters. Like, death like levels all of that playing field, right? And so this idea that you're working towards something at your death is like that final report card is nonsense. Like, what you need to be doing is living the journey of your life to the maximum capability possible. And if you're living in perpetual fear, I'm someone I know that it's not so much a fear of death, but it's a fear of suffering that still is not a positive aspect of my life. Like, I had a very close uncle, my Uncle Craig, my mom's brother, and I watched him eventually pass from lymphoma. Yeah. And I'm sorry about your father, and this is life. This is the life that we face. But what I remember him, I used to go shooting with him. He was one of the hardest serving tennis players, around. He could serve like over 120 before anybody was serving over 120, right? My mom was a professional tennis player, and it kind of ran in the family. And I'd play tennis with him, and he was always this like vigorous, like, kind of inspiring guy. And then I watched him get skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. And there's also the courage, the courage that he had through this process, but the relentless pain of like, he was getting up and drinking like 16 ounces of black coffee in the morning just because of the, all the chemo and everything was making him so tired. And it was so hard for him to like, and like, that was like the treasure that he would have to like give him enough energy. And he could barely like speak and communicate. And so this idea of, not so much the death, because I feel like all my psychedelic journeys have shown me the place beyond life, which is a beautiful, reunion with our soul self, right? So like where we came from, it's like going home. Yeah. But if like on the way home, so like home is dope, but if on the way home, it's nothing but getting your ass kicked like the whole way, that's what I'm still afraid of, to a certain degree. And I think that's a level of fear that I need to release, because how does that manifest? Well, I get sick and my glands get swollen and I'm like, oh fuck, I hope this isn't something serious, so then I get all this fear instead of just being like, yeah, I got a fucking cold, like I'll just rest and take it easy. I start to feel that anxiety and that worry about this suffering. And that's something I've really had to work on, so sometimes it's your fear of death, which I think it's important to remember that we're all going to die. Like that's what the Stoic says, memento mori. Remember you'll die. The samurai said, before all things, a samurai must keep in mind day and night the fact that he has to die. Like that will inspire you to actually enjoy life to a greater degree. But if you're afraid of that's the acceptance of it. But like in any way that whatever aspect you're afraid of, whether it's afraid of suffering or afraid of passing, or the fear is only going to be a constricting force.
There's this great quote, and it's not even a quote, it's like a tenet ideology of Buddhism, but I was reading it in the book Healing Your Inner Child by Thich Nhat Hanh, and highly recommend that book. And he talks about these 4 pillars of Buddhism that the Buddha talks about, which is number 1, I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty much like, number 1, I'm a human being and it is in my nature to die. Number 2, I'm a human being and it is in my nature to grow old and get sick. Number 3, I'm a human being and all things that I care about will change. By the way, these are like hitting on the biggest fears of humans, right? Yep. 1, 2, and 3. And then number 4 is, and again, I'm paraphrasing this, but it's like, I'm a human being, and the only thing I have control over in this life are my actions. And like, those are probably the 4 hardest things for human beings to accept. But if you accept them, it's like finally seeing that the sky is blue. You're like, okay. Or finally accepting that it's raining. We talked about InQ. He has, he's the greatest poet in America, in my opinion. And he has this poem called You Can't Argue with the Weather. You can't argue with the weather. You can't argue with the wind, but you can adjust your sails.
Yeah.
And what I like about parts of Buddhism, but also parts of other religions and philosophies, is that it helps you just see reality and decide, okay, whether I like it or not, it's how it is. And now that I can see how it is, as opposed to fighting it or projecting, what am I gonna do with it?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I'm trying to step into more and more at this stage of my life.
Yeah.
Not projecting what I want life to be, but seeing it for what it is, and then deciding, okay, what am I going to do about it?
I mean, that's always the story of all the great it's always about acceptance. It's like about intention, and it's that line between intention and surrender. Like I intend to live a long and healthy life, but I surrender to what my path will be. And like how how determined are you with that intention? Like, okay, you don't want to die. You want to live a long and healthy life. What are you really doing about it? Are you exercising? Are you getting sun? Are you eating good food? Like, are you really backing up what you're saying, what you're giving lip service to? Like, I want to live a long and healthy and happy life. Well, are you doing the shit that you can do to live that? Or are you just saying that and doing something completely opposite, which is doing something that temporarily masks your fear of not living a long and healthy, happy life, you know? So it's like having an intention and really doing it. It's really going and shouting Mr. King. It's really actually going and working out. It's really actually having the green juice. It's really actually doing whatever those things are.
But you're doing it for yourself, not because you're making a deal with the Grim Reaper of if I have enough green juice, you'll wait until I'm 90.
Yeah.
Because I had a friend, someone was telling me like, I don't know, there's this like thing, I don't know if it's like a Tim Urban, there's like these things of like, life calculator, type in your age and it tells you how many days left you have until you die. I hate those things.
Yep.
I hate those things. And it's crazy. It gives everyone else I know comfort. And to me, it like drives me crazy. I have a friend who, she was my friend. Her name is Mallory. We were friends since kindergarten. And I'm 27 right now. She passed away when we were 25. And like she was... If there was a movie of like the perfect person, like that's who they would base it off of. Mm-hmm. She was like the smartest person in the grade, the nicest person it's literally one of those people that if they made a movie about it, you would be like waiting for the shoe to drop.
She would be in competition with my cousin Eric, who died in a car wreck at about the same age. Like literally, those kind of things really kind of fuck you up.
That fucks me up that you just said that right now
because it
fights against how the world should work.
It
still drives me. It's a thing I can admit. Things still drive me crazy. That still drives me crazy.
You know what was one of the interesting things about, there's lots of metaphysical ways that you could understand it. Perhaps he had learned the lessons. He was so full of love. It makes me
literally crawl in my skin even going into that hypothetical.
Right. So let's say we're here to learn.
Let's
take the hypothetical that our souls incarnate, Stardust comes into, we enter this Stardust to like incarnate and we're here to learn. And if you nail it right out of the gate, and you've learned and you're just a being that's just loving everyone and enjoying life
to stay alive.
So maybe the lessons.
My grandpa's 93 right now. He's not going anywhere for a while, bro. As much as I love him, he's not going anywhere.
So like maybe they learned the lessons and then it was like time to go.
And I'm not saying this like because she passed away and I'm trying to make her. No, dude. Even in like 3rd grade, all the teachers were like, she's the smartest, the nicest, the most athletic, the sweetest, the most mature, and she has a chronic illness where she's supposed to die any year now, even when we were 8. And she kept her journals, and her journals just got published this year and became a best-selling book. It's like, and the reason this, obviously I love her and I care about her and there's grief there, but it's also like the reason going back to like, I don't like these like life calculators. Even Mallory, you're not promised anything. And I think both things are true, which is, yes, live like you're going to live to 90. Think long-term, drink your, juice, go work out, go, chase Larry King through, go live fully. And know that you're not promised anything. And I actually think having the ability to hold both those things is pretty important.
Yeah, no doubt. The other
sorry
thing
to hear about your cousin too, man.
That's all right, brother. It's like this is life.
Were you guys close growing up?
We were. His name is Eric. He was the one I looked up to the most.
Oh, like so he was the perfect.
He was like the guy.
Figure.
He was like, he played college sport. He's a college athlete. Played college soccer. Like he was older enough to me, and all my older stepbrothers and like older. They would always kind of kick my ass a little bit and like but he was always like so nice and like so supportive and like so like fun and like loving and like all the best things, and strong as shit, and like also like in all the ways. And one of the interesting things about how he passed, it was somebody who was, he was driving on a bendy road, and somebody was drunk driving the other way, and
it's always the other person who's drunk.
And so, but one of the things was he was so nice to his family and nice to everybody that he insisted on buying. He had like the cheapest car he could possibly have, right? Even though he could have afforded more, but every spare penny he got, he gave back. And so his car had, I don't even know if it even had airbags or if it like had anything like that. And so you wonder if like, who knows? I mean, accidents are accidents. Weird shit can happen no matter what, right? But, car safety is a real thing. And like, I think the family I've often wondered, like, that's interesting. It's interesting where there's a point of you don't take even enough time to protect yourself and to like do the things because you're so giving and like so into your service that, you're willing to put yourself at risk. Of course, you never think about a car accident like that. You probably thought about the ego versions of a car, like, well, I don't need a good looking car, I don't need that. But having a safe car, like
if you're lucky enough to be able to afford it,
if you can do it, like that's important to like make those modular decisions to safeguard yourself if you can. But it could have just been the other metaphysical thing where that was exactly what was supposed to happen, and he'd learn the lessons, and just like your friend. So it's interesting, it's always to look at how this all happens. We don't really know. We don't have the universal wisdom to know. All we can do is guess and learn and know that, fuck, I loved him as much as I could at the time. And, I still think about him. I still got a little picture of him up on my meditation altar, and I'll still light a candle every now and then and blow a little smoke and, say hi to a smiling picture of him in a boat. And then I remember from being in Lake Powell with him on a houseboat. And I'm sure you do the same with your friend, just keep him in your thoughts and your memories. And that's really what we can do. Was another interesting one is one of my spiritual teachers, Don Howard. He's really sick right now. And he's the one I went down to Peru to do like Wachuma with and ayahuasca with. I remember I was sitting in the boat and thinking about him, and he's, going to pass probably pretty soon.
I'm sorry.
And I was feeling I was on the medicine. I was feeling like the grief of it. And then I had this like astral communication with him, and he goes, "Hey, where you think I'm going, brother? Where you think I'm going?" And I started laughing. I was like, "I guess you're not going anywhere, huh?" And he's like, "No, I'm always going to be here." Like that unborn and undying part of him isn't going anywhere. And like that's something that I can push out as my own belief based on my own understanding of what the soul is or what consciousness is or whatever your vocabulary permits. Like there's an unborn and an undying part of us. I mean, shit, I've talked to my deceased grandma probably 25 times since she's died, and that might make me sound like a fucking psycho, but like
I know I've talked to my dad.
It happens, and whether that's a projection of my imagination or not, like
either way, you experienced it. I
experience it,
and you feel it.
You feel it, and it's a productive, loving, warm experience of that communication, and so. It's interesting. We have all of these, this is a long talk about death, but we have all of these ideas about death, but they're not really accurate,
I have a theory that's not enjoyable for people to hear. I'll say it anyways. I think a lot, and not all, I think a lot of the self-development, you look at the past 10 years, there's been a big boom in like morning routines and hacks and optimizations and biohacking. You've seen the, boom.
Yeah. I've been a part of it. So.
A big part of it, right? But I'd say some people take it much farther than you, like to like neuroses, obsessive, stuff. At least I feel you put a lot of humanity into it, and there's some personality and humanness in it. But some people it's very robotic and obsessive. I think a lot of it, not all of it, is fueled by fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's almost as if I can, there's this, again, I'm not judging. I'm reflecting because I'm part of it too. I grew up, man. I was 18 reading the 4-Hour Workweek. I was 19 reading the 4-Hour Body. You know, I was 20 years old doing P90X twice a day. Like, hello, number one person. Like, I'm not judging or projecting. I'm reflecting on my own actions. There was for me personally, a subliminal thought that I was not aware of, that if I have the perfect morning routine, find the perfect cold email template, find the perfect breakfast smoothie, do the perfect optimization of my efficiency, I won't have to suffer as much as I'm currently suffering. That if I can hack my morning routine, do the perfect 5-minute journal every day, do the follow Tony Robbins' breathing, I won't feel the pain that I've seen my parents go through, or I won't feel the insecurities that I've been feeling. There was this subliminal, subconscious desperation to not feel pain anymore that was fueling my obsessive, self-growth.
And that self-growth had the hue and fabric and like the touch of anxiety.
Yes!
Anxiety the whole time.
You
which
just saying
stress
that word,
is the killer.
Triggers all of it. Yes,
Yeah.
dude. And like, you can see, and again, one of the things I like about you personally is I've only known you in this last year of your life. I don't know you from earlier on. But there's a difference when I'm around you of like you sort of coming to terms with death happens, I'm imperfect, I'm a work in progress, and it's okay. And I'll still grow.
Yeah.
And I'll still, which is a more comfortable for me to be around as opposed to like people who are trying to be the perfectly optimized human.
Right.
Because to be the perfectly optimized human means you're afraid or terrified of what it means to not be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And that fear has a biological impact. Like,
dude, forget about biological impact. You're in the room with those people and you're more nervous than you were before.
You bear the cost. Bear the cost of that. And it's probably a greater cost than whatever, lack of gluten. Like if you're terrified of gluten your whole life, it's like fucking, you got gluten threats.
Dude, I make that a t-shirt.
You got like
please.
gluten monsters
your
lurking
fear
in
of
everything.
Death is worse than your fear of gluten. Dude, that's actually, I'm not kidding. I would wear that. I would wear that shirt. Yeah. Your fear of death is worse than your fear of gluten. Dude, that's so good. I don't know. I feel like that just like summarized a lot of my thoughts of the past few years.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just what can we do to alleviate that? And then you look at the great teachers. Ram Dass is probably the teacher that I'm the highest on right now because I think he's one of the few that really made it in this life. He made it. Like he made it to that point of what the Buddhists would call enlightenment, or like what you would want a spiritual master.
I love that
you
didn't use made it as like money or
no.
You said made it as a mindset and a view of life.
Yeah, as a soul that came here to learn.
Like the journey from fear to love.
Yeah.
You said he made it
to love.
Yeah,
I am loving awareness. That's his mantra, and he did it. Like as far as everything I can tell and everything I can hear and everything I can sense. He is loving awareness. That
as
is
much
that
as
is,
he can be.
as much as any human can that is incarnated, right? And he did a lot of work around death, like a lot of work. I was listening.
Well, he literally also almost died, which actually took
the stroke, and that was like his final. That was like his
he
final.
Needed the stroke that was his final
exam. That was his final exam on this.
Have you seen the Netflix documentary, the 30-minute one?
No, but there's a new one that just came out called Becoming Nobody.
I heard.
It's fucking awesome.
Such a great
I got
title.
an early screening of that. It's
such
amazing.
A great title.
There's also a podcast, the Here and Now Network has episode 150. And in that, he talks about how he took a bunch
episode 150.
Yeah, because I just listened to it yesterday. Amazing. And he was talking about how he would do these experiments where he would take a bunch of people in and then he would take he would collect police footage of gnarly like accident scenes, people dying, decapitated bodies, people eviscerated, people like.
He did this personally.
He spent a lot of time with the dying versus in the physical, and like being there at the moment of death and like being at peace. A lot of us haven't been around those moments except for these real. But he wanted to like understand death in a different way. But anyway, so he was doing an experiment where he collected all of this police footage, just the raw police footage, what they use to like capture the scene. So in case there's whatever, this is what the police do, He took that and he showed it to a bunch of people without any prompting. And then he watched the people and everyone was like, oh God.
And he watched it.
Oh, well, he's watching. He's already gone through the practice, right? And then he's like, all right, everybody, now we're going to go through a meditation, and we're going to go through this meditation where we accept death, where we understand the physical body and how the blood works and the organs, and how that we're this unborn, undying spirit, this loving awareness that is imbued in this physical body, and like brings people through this whole thing. And it's like, and a breathing exercise. And then now we're going to watch this again with a different set of footage with this understanding. And he just watched as people with eyes open just breathed and like sent love to the body for what it had done so far, and saw how the reaction was totally like completely reframed everything they could see. And even though I haven't done that experiment,
it's crazy in the moment how you can change that.
And he just completely changed people's perspectives. And I bet people listening too are like, oh wow, I guess too if I just
I'm listening to you right now, and I'm like, yes, that's
right. It makes sense, right? Like it's like getting rid of this shock and fear of like, all right, yeah, we do have a body and it's vulnerable and it's filled with fluids, and those fluids might leak out of our body and we may expire at any point, or anything may happen.
And
but
that's okay.
That's okay.
Because that's how it was designed to be.
That's okay. Yeah.
One of the wisest people I've ever met is the chaplain who helped. He's a hospice chaplain. So he's literally works with only people who are about to die. And he was just so happened randomly assigned to us with my dad's hospice provider in my dad's final weeks. And his name is, call him Chaplain Kevin. And he's like surprisingly young. He's in his 30s, but he is one of the wisest people I've ever met. And a lot of people are like, oh, if you want to understand life, like talk to someone old. Yes. Also, there's a lot of old people who are about to die who are terrified of it.
Yep.
There's something
There's just calcified fear.
Calcified.
You're looking at you're looking like the petrification of fear that's so hard.
Correct.
Occasionally, sometimes.
I also know I have a friend, his mom, her name is like JJ, and she's like bright light. So there's. I think when you're older, you're just further along whichever path you're on.
Totally.
You're either like extreme fear or extreme love. But when you're a hospice chaplain, you're like seeing it every day, and you only walk away with wisdom there if you're good at your job. And one of the biggest things he's taught me a lot, but one of the biggest things he says is you die the way you lived. Because the big question is, why is, because this is something that I couldn't have expected. Even on your deathbed, when you're in a coma, you still have a personality in a weird way. There's some people, my dad slipped into a coma on Wednesday and held on Thursday, Friday, 3 days in a coma. On Friday, they said he had 1 hour left. Held on Friday, Saturday, past Sunday night. And then there's some people my grandfather who passed away last year, also in hospice. This is the craziest thing. I wasn't there, but I heard from his nurse. He was at home. He had a live-in nurse, and his wife was in the house too. At 9 p.m., he called for his nurse. She came in. They had a small little apartment. She came into the room. He held her hand, kissed her hand, and said, "Thank you for everything." And then she left the room, and he took his final breath. And you die the way you live. And I don't think there's a good way or a bad way, but I think it's just beautiful. You died the way you live. And one of my friends, when my dad was passing, heard my chaplain say this, and he had a really interesting perspective on it. So he goes, so shouldn't we live the way we want to die? And I thought that was really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Love all the way. That's
Yeah.
another thing that Ram Dass says, like,
Yeah.
love,
if you
love
want,
all the way. If you want.
If you don't want, I'm
if
serious.
you don't
I'm
want love
not
all the
being
way,
sarcastic.
yeah,
I'm
for
not being
sure.
sarcastic. If you don't want, cool. No, I'm serious. I know
It's
that
true.
sounds like callous or no. I'm serious, man.
No, but that's actually you loving them.
I want to go that way. It sounds like you want to go that way, but like, dude, you and I are not the authorities of how human beings should be.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way we want to be. The only person Aubrey is in charge of is Aubrey, and the only person Alex is in charge of is Alex. And yeah, if someone wants to go another way, like, cool. As long as that's not hurting me or hurting anyone else, like, do your thing.
Yeah.
Problem is, it normally does hurt other people.
Yeah, I do.
It's very rare that you're like really angry and cold and you aren't hurting other people.
Right.
I haven't seen it yet, but if you can pull it off.
Yeah. If your last words are, I wish you hadn't been such a worthless piece of shit, son. Like that's like probably not the best way to go out. You probably want to go love all the way. So you probably want to live love all the way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that is a great way to reframe it.
This is one of the things I learned from the interview with Quincy Jones. He said, no one else can love you until you learn how to love you.
Mm-hmm.
No one else can love you until you learn how to love you. I think that's true whether you're 20 years old or whether you're 90 years old on your deathbed. No one else can love you until you learn how to love you.
Yeah, that's what Don Miguel Ruiz says. You're only capable of loving another to the extent of which you love yourself. And that means the limit on the amount of love you have for yourself is how much you judge yourself.
Doesn't that make you think back to like your early, romantic relationships? And you're like, wow. Like for me, I think about like I was definitely loving the most I could. I haven't had like that many relationships, but in the ones I did, but I'm like, oh man, the capacity has definitely changed.
Yeah.
And I talk about this with my mom a lot. Definitions of love change. Dude, when I was 10 years old, if I had to define love, it would have been very different than the way I define love now. I'm sure even for you, even if you think about how did you define love 5 years ago versus how you define love now? Actually, I'm very...
5 months ago.
Not hypothetical. I actually want to know. Okay, walk me through it. 5 years ago, 5 months ago, today. If you had to like... in 1 minute, describe your definition for each one. So let's start with 5 years ago.
5 years ago,
I am genuinely curious.
My understanding of love is you're loved based on
this is 5 years ago.
What you do. And that requires a ton of external validation and a ton of external things to happen. You need lots of other people to love you. You need lots of success. You need that whole idea of legacy and what you did. And your worth of love.
Not losing the basketball game as a kid.
Yeah, your worth of love is based on what you do.
Right.
And whether that's in your relationship or whether that's in your life, it's applied, it's internalized to yourself. It's based on what you do. And then more and more, I don't think I'm completely out of the woods of that yet, but like more and more, you realize you're not loved based on what you do. You're loved because you are, because it's who you be. And it's like, that's what makes you worthy of love. It's not what you do. It's like who you are. And like this Paul Selig says, like how you serve, like what you are, and which is love. And it's just as we accept that, then it changes the whole framework. But you can still get fucking caught up in those old patterns, like looking at, oh man, well, this person's like so successful and look at me, look what I'm doing. I'm only getting this many downloads when this person has this many downloads, and I'm only doing this thing, and my company's only this size, and this person's company's this size, and then this blah, blah, blah. You have all these external criteria, and then that can get you in a place where you don't love yourself anymore, and then you're not open to loving anybody else anymore. And then that anxiety, which I've felt in some degree most of my life, starts to creep back in because like, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? I'm not doing enough. I'm not worthy of love. And that can create some kind of urgency, but it also creates this paralysis, and it also creates all the depressions and all of these different states that I've been in, which is not just loving myself for being. I am, period, full stop. That's why I'm worthy of love.
Okay, so that was 5 years ago. Is that where you are 5 months ago? Is that where you are now?
Then 5 months ago, I was breaking free of that paradigm, right? Like breaking free of that. Finally, like, wow, like I'm not worthy of love because Whitney loves me. I'm not worthy of love because of all of these things. I might be worthy of love just because of who I am. And that was like the turning point. And then the next 5 months has been kind of like,
isn't it sucks that it's pain
deeper.
that gives you?
Oh, I don't know what else. I don't know what else cracks I don't know what else is the nutcracker. Like if we're like if we're like love is the walnut and everything else, all the fear and all the other ideas is like the shell. Well, to get to the walnut, you got to crack the shell.
There's a quote from one of my favorite authors, Pema Chodron, and she says, "Pain will either harden your heart or pierce it open, and the default is harden."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It has to be a conscious choice to let the pain pierce it open.
Yeah. Yeah. To pry open that nutshell.
Right.
And
but it's pain that does that.
It is more often than not.
Yeah.
That's one of the ways we learn, which then allows you, when you realize that, it allows you to love your pain. Because you realize that your pain is serving this greater purpose.
Right. Yeah.
And then you can love, and as soon as you can get to, I love my pain because of what it's teaching me. It's why Ram Dass loved his stroke. Oh, okay. Now I got this. Now I have to be even more in my heart.
I'm not there, but I'm there intellectually.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm a work in progress. So that's fine.
That's it. And loving that, like I love myself where I'm at and I can be better. Like both are true.
Okay, so that was 5 months ago. Where are you like today, right now? Well, how do you define love?
It's a much deeper understanding of that. Like it's, I understand that, I had someone reflect to me on, I've been still, throughout all the relationship turmoil and throughout all of the different challenges that I've had, I've still been able to be intimate and be with like some amazing and beautiful women, and people ask like, oh man, how do you do it? Like whatever. And everybody thinks like, oh, it's this reason, it's because of what I'm doing. Like I'm doing something, and it's really not, it's like somebody asked me that. He's like, take me under your wing. How do you do it, bro? And I was like, all right, man, you really want to know? It's like, love them no matter what. Love them no matter what. Like, let them be free and be the best version of yourself you can. And like, that's it, like be your best, which is not do your best, which is, you should do your best if you're doing something, but be your best, which is love. There's nothing better than love. Be your best. Love somebody in that unconditional sense, which is the only thing that's really interesting to me moving forward in relationship, is that non-conditional sense of love. It's not that I love you because you scored this many points, or I love you because it's like, I love you no matter what. I love you whether you love me back. I love you no matter what. No matter what you choose, I love you. You're free. I love you to be whatever you want to be. And then you actually get to love yourself that way. But that shit gets challenged, like the business comes into a tight spot and you're like, fuck, because you forget, you don't think
you're a human
worried.
being.
Yeah. You're worried that you're not going to love yourself on the other side of that,
Yeah.
or something else happens and you're worried, you're still baptized in this conditional love paradigm.
Because you grew up, dude,
we all grew up and it's reinforced around us.
You didn't grow up in the Garden of Eden. You grew up in
no.
Earth,
Earth.
And there's this quote by Maya Angelou, which I love, which it says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it says, love liberates. It doesn't hold on. That's ego. Love says, yes, I would love if you were next to me, but I love you if you were down the block. I love you if you were in China. I love you because of who you are. Love sets the other person free.
Yeah.
And I feel like that really goes along with what you just said.
Yeah. And there's, one of my favorite characters from fiction is Cyrano de Bergerac.
What? The guy with the nose?
The guy with the nose. Yeah.
I love how I took the one thing.
Have you ever read the
Trivia,
play?
Alex. Who's the
guy
famous
with the
character in literature
nose?
with the big nose? Cyrano de Bergerac.
Who is the guy with the
What's
nose?
the story? I don't really remember.
It's-
He made didn't he make like some kind of like promise or something?
No,
or
he was like
the moon.
helping.
Isn't there something with a moon?
He
or-
did. He did have a lot of stuff with the moon.
Okay, yeah.
But the part that I'm going towards
Cliff
was
Notes, senior year of high school.
ultimately, so he had some flaws in his own understanding of love because he thought he needed to be loved based upon his own beauty. So that was his fatal flaw, right? His fatal flaw was that he believed that he was only lovable if he didn't have that pretty nose. So that his love of his life, Roxanne, was only going to love Christian, who was the beautiful one. But he loved Roxanne so much that he was willing to help Christian have the intellect that she would fall in love with him. And so he would write the letters and he would write the poems and he would do the things to position. And even when Christian died, he held, he wouldn't even, explain that actually it was me who was writing all those letters and risking my life to get to you and writing and signing them in Christian's name, even in this war and all of this thing. But he talks about, so he had some flaws. One, his fatal flaw was that he didn't believe that he was worthy of love unless he was handsome. But the nobility of his love was he recognized that it was enough if he knew that Roxanne was laughing at the things that he was writing. He was like, if the laughter born of my sacrifice, if you're laughing from something born of my sacrifice and I never get to take the credit and you will never know that it's me.
Still sweet to me.
Like that's still sweet to me.
And I think
that's beyond the ego, right? It's like beyond saying like, well, I'll be funny for you, but then I'm going to be the funny one and you'll love me more for that. So it becomes transactional. It's like non-transactional love, where it's like, no matter what, like you put something out there, you may not get anything in return from it physically, but you'll know that you're spreading some joy and love and happiness to somebody, even if you don't get any credit for it.
Yeah. And I think something I love about this conversation right now is like, even you answering your 5 years ago, 5 months ago, and now, is how you are peeling away the layers of yourself. And, we keep bringing up Inkyu, and he deserves to be brought up again. There's something he says that I love. I am a work in progress, which is a very liberating and honest and vulnerable statement. Mm-hmm. I'm a work in progress. And I think you and we make livings, writing or speaking, acknowledging that we don't have the answers. If anything, all we have are questions. Mm-hmm. And being able to acknowledge that even 5 months, the answer that you have on life's biggest what is love, is changing.
Yep.
And you're realizing, my answer from 5 months ago wasn't accurate enough. I like that, because what that does is it gives permission to whoever's listening right now to know that they too not only are a work in progress, but that's exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. That you today are tomorrow's idiot, and you're still worthy of love.
Lovable.
You're still
lovable,
a lovable, fully lovable
wonderful.
Idiot.
Yes.
Because you're just peeling away one layer further.
Dude, that's
of
what
your
the third door is. My 7 years of being a love. Wow, that's actually really funny. That's a good stuff. My 7 years of being a lovable idiot. But I say that in a loving way, not in like I was an idiot demeaning way, and I was learning. That's the point.
Of course.
If I'm not calling myself, again, I wish I had a better word than idiot, but if I wasn't, that means I didn't learn anything from 7. There's a quote from, I can't even remember who said it, which is like, I think it's actually Muhammad Ali, saying something like, if you can't look back at yourself from 10 years ago and say, wow, that was a completely different person, you are doing something grossly wrong.
Yeah.
And I love how 90% of people, at least in my life, love to go, and I'm not saying they do this to me, but I just know people do this in general. They go, you changed, bro.
And they use that as an insult.
Man. You changed.
They use that as a slight.
Oh, you can't make it out to dinner tonight? You changed, man. Oh, you don't want to go out to the bar? You changed, man.
They buy you a round of shots and you go, no, I'm okay.
Bro, you think you're better than, you changed, man. You changed. You don't drink anymore? You changed, bro. Yes, I changed. Yes, I hope you do too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Clearly I am venting. Yeah.
Yeah. We have this idea. We want things to be consistent. We like cling to this idea of permanence. That was one of the things that I think you said in the Thich Nhat Hanh, list of different things. Like
everything I love will change.
Everything I love will change, including yourself. Like including yourself. You're going to change. The things you like will change. Everything. And sometimes I still catch myself doing things based on a pattern of something that I used to love. Like, well, I mean, I'm used to this being something I love, but then I'm really in it. And I'm like, do I even love this anymore? Like, am I even enjoying this? Or is this just a pattern of something I used to enjoy?
Does it feel good? Because I'm just going in.
Yeah, it's just like you're just kind of doing the same thing over again. And then it's just liberating yourself from that and being okay with like, all right, well, maybe and maybe it won't be, again, it won't be linear. It'll be erratic. It'll be like all of a sudden, like for now, I don't want anything to do with what was formerly the things that I love. I want to be totally different. Then maybe you might go back and be like, actually, I like some of that stuff. And then I'll go back and it's all fucking fine.
I'm sorry. I'm like laughing because they just had like a preposterous. I don't know if you have like commercials in the middle of your podcast, but it'd be funny if like, this episode is brought to you by Trinity Care Hospice Providers. Just like, this episode of the Aubrey Marcus podcast has been brought to you by Gorgon's Coffins. For your like, just like really dark.
Sky, get on that. We need hospice providers.
Can I just say, it is relieving. I don't know if you're enjoying this. I'm enjoying this because it's shit we don't talk about. And I think it's shit that permeates all aspects of our life, but we don't talk about it because, number one, there's not really a space to talk about it. And if there is, it's not a cool space to talk about it. So I say thank you to you for... And also, who was the Lemon? Who was that person who asked that for?
Yeah, Aaron Lemon.
Wow, that guy deserves some love.
Right? He put us on this whole 45-minute tangent with that thing. He was just...
Be careful what you ask us.
He was just typing away on his Twitter.
All right, let's open it up. What's next?
What else do we got? All right. Okay, we'll go with the first question here. And this is with Felipiop77. He says, how to limit the suffering that comes with being a compassionate person. I struggle a lot with that. Say
it again. Yeah.
How do you limit the suffering that comes with being a compassionate person?
I like that question. You go first.
This is hard because you see
lot.
the suffering in the world. And if you try to actually empathize with all of the suffering in the world and like actually compassion means actually literally to be with someone's suffering. Compassion, like passion means suffering from an etymological root word. Yeah, that. Passion means suffering. Calm is
that's
from
what
Latin.
It means.
It means with suffering. It means with someone's suffering. So literally, when you're saying compassion, it means you're with someone's suffering.
Passion means suffering.
Passion means suffering. So the passion of the Christ is the suffering of the Christ. Yeah. So
I need to look this up more.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
This is fascinating, but okay.
So like compassion inherently is placing yourself in a position to be with the suffering. And it's, I think, something that we need to dip into, but we can't live with the suffering of the world because it will ultimately be somewhat debilitating, right? Like we can also choose, and then the opposite of that word is compersion, which is with someone's pleasure. And nobody talks about that.
I don't know that word. I've heard the word a couple times before. I don't know it that often, though. Compersion.
Compersion. So there's like compassion and compersion. That's where you're with someone's pleasure. That's where when you have a good friend and like when you got that Larry King thing, like your homie was in compersion. He was like, hell yeah, man. Like he was fired up. Or when I watch my friends win a MMA fight, I'm like so excited for them. I'm with them in their pleasure. So I think there's a place for us to be both compassionate and both have compassion and compersion so that we feel what they feel, we see them, and then we're able to kind of be with them, but we don't have to, there's not a burden to live there with them in that. There's a burden, there's an opportunity to take a higher perspective and to dip into compersion and be with someone's pleasure, dip into someone's suffering and be with them in their suffering so we understand it. Yeah. And that way that builds that bond of friendship and that famous Avatar line that shook the world, which is, I see you, right? That's really what you're saying. Like, I see you. I feel what you feel. You know, like I'm with you. But I don't think it's possible for us to live in that state.
That's literally the definition of intimacy. I see you.
Yeah.
And that's also the definition of the word namaste. I see you.
Yeah. So I think it's just a matter of know that that's a good thing to have, but don't feel the burden that you have to live there with the world's suffering. You can also choose to live there with the world's pleasure and to live there with all of the full expression of everything that's going on. So I think that would be my advice is like, good. Like, I'm glad, like, I'm happy for everybody who can feel compassion, but also be there with all the other full expression of everything else too.
I like that. Read the question one more time again, please.
How do you limit the suffering that comes with being a compassionate person? I struggle a lot with that.
Okay. I'll say 3 things. First, a great question. First thing is compassion is beautiful. So I commend you for practicing it and being on that path. Number 2 goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is suffering and pain are a natural part of the human experience. Number 3, I think, is the meatier part of the question that's sort of the subtext. And I might be projecting my own experiences onto it. But I know that I was raised, yes, with a lot of love and a lot of support. I feel I won the lottery in many ways. At the same time, I grew up with an implicit message that someone else's suffering is my responsibility. Wow, I hope some family members are not listening to this right now. But like, I love them. That's why I said I hope they're not, because I actually love them. But I was raised in a way of someone else's suffering is part of my responsibility. Which I think every relationship, there's a healthy flavor of that, which is if someone you love is suffering, be there for them. But I think the difference between support and showing up, and it is your responsibility to manage their pain and not theirs.
Yep.
And when you grow up as a child that way, and you think that that's the way every relationship goes, it becomes harder and harder the older you grow up to live a manageable life. And the first step of the 12 steps is I am powerless over blank, and trying to have power over it makes my life unmanageable. And for me, I don't know if that's where the question was going, but for me, the subtext I saw under it is I'll find myself compassion leading me to now I have to fix it for them. Now I need to not even fix, solve it. Not out of fear, but out of love, out of care.
Yeah.
And with many relationships, that will make your life unmanageable. And God forbid, and I say God forbid, but it's very common. Many times the people on the receiving end of that don't know boundaries. That's how those relationships sort of exist. So again, the wording of that question is really interesting to me because it's like, how do you limit this? He didn't even say take away.
Yeah.
The word limit instantly made me think of boundaries because it sounds like he's okay with a little bit of the uncomfortability of the compassion, which compassion does come with uncomfortability. But it sounds like, and I might be reading into it, but it sounds like the pain of his compassion is running amok.
Yep.
And I can relate to that. And to me, it's because I didn't have A, boundaries, and B, an understanding that I am powerless over their journey.
Mm-hmm.
And the hardest part is when someone you love is going down a path of pain or self-sabotage or other sabotaging and not being able to help.
Yeah.
When you're on a boat and you see someone you love drowning, and as far as you reach out your hand, you can't reach them, is one of the most painful experiences in life. And it's more painful the more you love that person.
Yeah.
And I think one of the beauties of 12-step programs, whether it's AA or Al-Anon or anything is, at least for me, showing me that, and it's hard because I was raised the opposite. I was raised that if you love your blank, you will do anything to save them. And I grew up feeling like that actually, it made sense to me. And it's been very hard to unwind those thoughts of the person is an adult. This is hard for me to even talk. This is very new to me, and it's still a very, like, my back is like tensing up, and like it's still very new for me, and like it's not an easy thing to talk about. But
it's also, one thing that this.
Thank you for jumping in.
One thing that reminds me of is, like, if a kid falls down and the parents, and the kid starts to cry, and the kid's not badly hurt, or even if they are, like, pretty. Like, if the parents go, oh my God, and they start freaking out, then the kid's going to freak out more, because we look for social proof of our pain, suffering and our pain, right? So some people think that the compassion is to, like, really sit with them in this and agree with what they're saying in, like, such a deep way that they justify their pain, and then you'll both ruminate in it together, and you think that's compassion, but that's actually not the most compassionate thing to do. The best thing to do when the kid falls down is like, you're all right, buddy. Like, you're all right. It's okay. Like, no worries. Like, and then they look at you and they're like, oh yeah, maybe I am okay. And like the same thing, I have a couple friends going through really challenging emotional things right now. And so it's not denying the fact that they fell down. It's not denying the fact that they skinned their knees. It's the fact that, like, no, you're all right. Like, no matter what this is, like, it's going to be okay. And then, so part of what I'll do is I'll not be blind to what they're going, not be callous, be like, yeah, that's rough. But then providing the perspective of, like, the times that you've been through, and then the times where you've made it through, and believing that they'll make it through, and that it is going to be all right. And then when you can actually offer that other perspective of, and then turn it into laughter or turn it into something else, like, you actually end up switching it from this rumination into the pain into, like, it's going to be all right. This is the human experience. It has all this pain and suffering, and it's all fucked up, and we can laugh about these different things. And then it, like, alleviates it, because ultimately we've all been through hard shit, and we're all okay. We're all still laughing, and we're all still enjoying it for the most part, and even if we're not, with that greater understanding of death and where we're going, and the fact that, death is just a going home, even if that thing does involve dying, instead of projecting your own horror and your own fear of death, projecting your own confidence of, like, oh, well, it looks like you get to go home a little earlier, like, and then, so you come with that kind of love of, like, this is a ceremony that you get to experience before any of us. And, like, wow, like, I know this is hard, but that's also an amazing and beautiful thing. And then being able to reframe with a different perspective, with a broader perspective, is often one of the most compassionate things that you can do, because that's going to be, it's basically saying, I see you and it's okay, and I love you no matter what. Like, I see you drowning in this shallow water, and I know that you could just stand up, and you'll stand up whenever you want.
God, that analogy makes me really uncomfortable, because it's so true.
Yeah.
I know that this conversation is going to interesting places, because this is the most uncomfortable I've been. No, I'm serious. I'm not saying that as, like, a compliment or as an insult. It's just an observation. I haven't been this uncomfortable in a long time. And I'm comfortable for the most part. But I'm saying, like, there's a good 15% of this conversation where I'm sort of, like, wanting to scoot my chair back a little and be like, this is...
It is a weird thing.
What is it? Is it shame? Is it fear? I don't know what's going on.
I think there's some hidden judgment of the situation. There's, like, a hidden judgment of that this isn't what it's supposed to be.
I did not write this book to come on podcast to talk about my family's like this. That's, I think, and I think it's new to me. I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah. It's new to me. If we're having this conversation a year, I'd probably be less squirmy.
Yeah. Like, to look at someone, let's say, there's a funny scene. I think it was like Robin Hood Men in Tights or whatever. I think is the reference I'm making. But anyway, someone falls, like Little John or somebody falls into some water, and he's drowning there, like sword or stick fighting on a bridge. And maybe it was Prince of Thieves. I don't know if it was the real one or the joke one, whatever. But he, like, falls in the water. He can't swim. And he's like, oh, I'm drowning. And then he's like, actually, you can just stand up. You know what I mean?
Dude.
But like, and that's, so from an emotional standpoint, there's so many times that we can see that, like, all you have to do is stand up and you're out of it.
When have you, in your life, give me a tangible thing. It's probably a hard question, so take a second. Like, when have you been there? Where if you can go back in time, you would be like, yo, Aubrey, just stand up.
Yeah.
Like, when would you go back in time?
Well, so many times in relationships, it's like that, like where it's like the whole world is crashing down and everything. I'm like crawling around on the ground and like not knowing if I'm going to cry or vomit or like I'm just at the very bleak end of my own internal emotional pain. Whereas like the Aubrey now could be like, hey man, you're going to be fine. Yeah. Like all you have to do is love yourself. And stop looking at this.
So easy in
hindsight.
Stop
looking at this mirror that is showing you that you're not worthy of love, and just stand up into your own love and sovereignty. You know, and oftentimes you see it in relationship because that was causes so much pain. You know, in so many people is like, just stand up and love yourself and know that you're going to be okay, and maybe that this person isn't right for you.
It's the simplest advice, the hardest to execute.
Totally.
And the reason it's the hardest is not because it's so complicated, but if you just look at statistically in the world, it's one of the least implemented things, and which makes it probably the hardest. One of the hardest.
Yeah.
Oh man. It's such a good analogy to drowning when in shallow water. Damn. That's a great memoir title.
Yeah.
Drowning in shallow water.
Shallow water. That's like the story of it's the story of most
Drowning
humans.
in shallow water. The Alex Banayan story.
The story of all humans ever.
Good. That's
the story of all humans ever.
I love it. It's like one of my favorite things to do at like dinner parties, like go around the table and come up with funny memoir titles for people. Yeah. It's like I love myself on a good day. The blah 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 story. Like it's just like
yeah. It's interesting. All right, so this next question is actually somewhat related, I think. And this question is from Angela Stitch 1.
Sup, Angela Stitch 1.
Angela Stitch 1. How do you
You're on live.
Yeah.
Alex. Next caller.
How do you get past your physical self and value the unseen soul when the world is focused on appearances? I always get caught up in the approval of others and get afraid of losing love or acceptance, even when I know I am enough as I am. Drowning in Shallow Water, the memoir of Angela Stitch, the memoir of all people, right?
Really, way to throw her under the bus.
But it's the memoir of all people, right? Like
Drowning in Shallow. Damn, it is. Someone's gonna run with that. We're gonna like in 3 years like check the New York Times bestseller. And there's like a book
perennial bestseller,
like Drowning in Shallow Water, and then acknowledge like thank you to Alex and Aubrey for bullshitting for 3 hours on his podcast and giving me the idea that changed my life.
But she knows it. She knows like I always get caught up in the approval of others and get afraid of losing love or acceptance, even when I know I am enough as I am. So she knows
she's on the path.
She's on the path. She knows that she can stand. But she's still drowning in what the world is saying. The world's saying, you're drowning. You're not, you need to do this. You need to do this. But she actually knows that the water's shallow. But she's still, and that's the interesting part of this question.
She's at the start.
Yeah, and like that, we're a lot of us who are on the path know that. We all know.
I'm at the start too.
Yeah, me too. Like it's like I know this is shallow water. I know I can stand, but sometimes we like our fear will trick us into believing that, oh no, the water's deep. Like we're really going down this time, But some part of us is like, no, actually, it's not. Like I'm okay.
All right, Angela, I'm with you. I'll share something I don't like talking about. I'm gotten much better now compared to 5 to 10 years ago of having very loving thoughts in my head. Biggest area for improvement, body image thoughts. I would say that if I had to categorize negative thoughts in my head, I would say on the average macro, it's gone down drastically in the past 5 years through conscious effort and awareness. Still the highest proportion I don't even think there's a close second. I would say the second place is probably like no one wants to. They secretly don't like you.
Yeah.
Not you, but me. Yeah. Body image is the biggest one, and yeah, bro. When I was a kid, even growing up in my extended family, number one compliment people would get: "Have you lost weight?" Number one compliment. Number one critique: "Have you put on a little?" You know, and that's just within my family. Like, walk out. I grew up in Los Angeles. Step onto the street. Look up. What does every fucking bill? And there's the thing about like, as much as I love like the body positive movement, like it's based off of the foundation of the non-body positive move. It's not like an isolated movement. No, it's like brands wanting to. And again, I'm not bashing it. I think it's better than not. But like, you know, to put a body positive like Dove commercial right before the body unpositive Dove commercial, like, it's still there. The implicit message is still there, right? The implicit message is still there. And
the fact that you have to even call it a body positive,
that means there's a body negative,
and that you're getting press about it being a body positive thing, right? Rather than it just being like, these are bodies, and like people stop seeing it in that way. But that programming is running so deep, you know, so deep. But and it's also culturally relative too, right? Like you look at the Renaissance ideal of beauty versus the modern ideal of beauty, and they're fucking drastically different,
right?
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, even 300 years ago, the idea of a model was very. Forget it, 300 years ago. When was Marilyn Monroe around? Is that the 50s?
Yep.
60s?
Yeah. Different.
Very different, right?
Yeah.
And there's someone, I won't name her, but someone who I love very much in my life, is in the same boat as me with like these body image thoughts that we're both actively working on. And she wrote a sign for herself, which I love, that she like taped above her bed, which says, "Your body was loaned to you by God." That's enough reason to love it. And while I'm still working on that being a practical way of living, I love it being a aspirational way. Yeah. And it's something that I will think back to multiple times a day. And there's a thing too. This is the challenge. If I'm going to have that thought about myself, and this is what I talk about, another thing I don't want to talk about publicly, that's something I need to do when I look at other people.
Yep. Yeah, because if you're not doing
the
it
more
with yourself,
I judge myself, the more I
self.
judge other people. The more I judge other people, the more I judge myself. And if I want a good litmus test of how judgmental I'm being toward myself, how judgmental am I being towards other people?
Yep.
Pretty good litmus test because they are pretty correlated.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. You know, I think for me, a lot of
I feel like I'm going to be like damned to hell after everything I've admitted on this podcast.
A lot of my
so much shame.
A lot of my own stretch it out, work it out. A lot of my own self-love and self-confidence comes from a feeling, a sense of being in a powerful body. So like when I get sick, I get really really emotionally thrown. It's my identity. Like when my body's weak or injured, then all of a sudden, like I get really kind of thrown off because then I'm no longer like, that's where the sense of confidence I derive is like, oh, well, I got this strong physical body. So like a deep challenge for me is when something else is going on, when I have an illness or when I have an injury and I can't do something. And it's like,
we'll talk about this past year,
whoa,
right?
Yeah. I mean, sure. I got in that car wreck and then recognizing that I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even breathe, kiss, taste, anything like that. Right. But everybody still loved me. And then, so that taught me, So that actually taught me the other thing, which is like, wow, actually I can love myself, even if I'm, you know, been in this ghastly face, you know, transfiguring car accident and I've done these things. And maybe if my body doesn't work, but still like, I'm not fully ready to accept that. Like if I really ask my body, like, hey body, what do you want? body's like, yeah, man, a lot more yoga, some stretching, like swim some laps. And I'm like, cool, we're going to hit the kettlebells today. You know what I mean? Like, cause like I'm still attached to this, like
the fear of what will happen if I don't have the mass.
Right.
That
like the size
that
and
I've
the
said
power.
that I've said is what gives me worthy of respect and love. And
it's still in there deep for me. It's still fucking in there, So like I'm drowning in my own shallow water of like, what's the best thing? What does my body want? Well, my body definitely wants like probably to shed a few pounds of muscle and to stretch a little more and to like open up my hips and, like actually work on releasing some tension.
Open up those hips, man.
And what am I doing? Squatting, like not that, and that's an interesting reflection, and it's based upon how much I love myself. When you're
meditating, you're sitting down and your body says, we need to stretch it out today. And you're like,
cool.
Nope.
Thanks, body.
Nope.
Not going to do it.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. First step to change is awareness.
Yeah.
You want to hear something I wrote down in the middle of the night last night? This doesn't happen often, but like I normally sleep very well. Every now and then I'll wake up either with like a nightmare or I thought, and I had one 2 nights ago. And this hasn't happened in a long time. And the thought that came to me was, which I guess is sort of like the summary of this past year of my life, which is the first step in changing your reality is seeing your reality. The first step in changing your reality is seeing your reality. The second step, don't look away. And I like, by the way, this is like how my brain, at like 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up with like, well, this is what I guess what happens is I have thoughts over the course of a year, and then at some point my brain puts them in the right order.
Yep.
And, it took a year and put it in the right order. It's the second part of that realization that I think is the hard part. Because right now you just admitted to, you see the first part, which is if you want to change your reality, you have to see your reality. And your body is telling you, stretch. And by the way, these are all positive stuff, whether to stretch or do kettlebells.
Mm-hmm.
What if you're in an abusive relationship? What
Sure.
if your boss is abusive?
Sure.
What if the economy is about to collapse? The first step, I was on an airplane on the way here and I saw, remember the movie The Big Short or the book The Big Short?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much the whole movie is about a guy who, in order to change his reality, which is understanding the reality of the economy about to collapse, was the first person to see it and to not look away. I think it's not looking away. Because if you're going to see something that's wrong with your life or your reality, the human instinct when you see something scary is what?
Look away.
Yeah, look away. Yeah, you're a human being. Congratulations, you're a human being. If you actually want it to change, or forget about even change, if you even want to respond to it, you need to find the courage to not look away.
And let's talk about what looking away can actually be, because looking away can be,
my favorite topic.
It can be a form of self-medication, right? It can be like
Instagram.
Yeah. Distraction is a way of looking away.
Working.
Alcohol is a way. Any kind of thing that takes your mindset
disassociating.
Or it could be actually rationalizing. Well, and this is where you get slippery. And I've like watched myself be really slippery with it. And like, I've had to learn how to like hold my slippery rationalization self down and be like, well, like I run Onnit. So like, I can't just like lose a bunch of weight and like do yoga. Like I gotta be this for the health of my company. And then there's people whose salaries depend on, so I'll get slippery in my way of justifying this thing, which is really all ego, but like I'll find some slippery, half-cocked way of justifying this thing that I'm doing. And yes, granted, this is a novel, trivial thing that I'm talking about, but like nonetheless, like we get slippery in our way of justifying, rationalizing, looking away, distracting, all of these different things. And
you're
deluding
at least
ourselves.
Doing the next step of having the conversation within yourself. Most people, myself included, I call it for myself suppression energy, and it either comes from internally within me or many times also my surroundings. If I'm at a, like for me, I grew up with my family, like a completely valid form of suppression was overeating. Talk about first, you get complimented about losing weight, but also like a completely valid way. If you're at like anywhere in life, whether it's a family dinner or even home alone, if you are uncomfortable, like reach for a cucumber, ice cream, anything, fruit, whatever, you know, it could be healthy, it could be unhealthy. And I've started realizing if I'm just like literally at a party, at an event, anywhere, where I'm just like shoving things in my mouth, whether it's healthy things like mixed nuts and vegetables, or if it's unhealthy things, chocolate cake, like, trust me, I do it all. Like, it's just, I've just started being like, okay, what am I suppressing right now? And the reason I'm suppressing something is because whatever I'm feeling isn't safe to be feeling here.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's very rare you walk into a party or a dinner party or a family's house for Thanksgiving and they say, Aubrey, do not talk about your blank. But you fucking know when you walk into Uncle Joe's house to not talk about your blank.
Yeah.
You know, don't talk about whatever, your ayahuasca, your whatever it is, that Uncle Joe doesn't approve of that side of you.
Yep.
And
or you don't approve of you being vulnerable about that side of yourself.
And that's internal, right?
And that's the internal way that you're kind of avoiding.
It's a part
this
of yourself that you're ashamed of or afraid of.
And it's a problem too. Like, let's say you talk about friends that are in a bad relationship, right? Like, and they know you've talked to them about it. You've gone through it. And maybe you've even for a year or 2 years, you've talked about this relationship is really shitty, you know, and it's like hard. They'll be like, they'll always tell you like, yeah, it's done. But like, then it creeps back in and you don't get those calls. And then they're even ashamed to even talk to you about it anymore because they know that they're like, fuck, you know, he's been telling me this all along. And like, I'm doing this again. And all this shame, like
they'd rather bounce.
They'd rather bounce or avoid it or like keep it secret. Right. And then all of that repression is going to build up and it's going to make them feel sick, you know? And like the key thing, I've had this happen a couple times with friends of mine recently who've gone back into these toxic relationship situations. And it's like, you know what? I love you no matter what. And if you do that, like, that's okay. Like, you do that, go back as many times as you need to go back.
Shame is a motherfucker.
Yeah. Don't hold them in, give them a safe place that they can always tell you, even if it's the 400th time that they've come to you and be like, yep, went back to old George, you know, and fucking George is, emotionally manipulating me again, or George is, you know, unhealthy for me. And I went back, like, that's all right. I love you. Like,
right. As long as their chaos in their life isn't becoming your chaos.
Right.
That's the trick.
You can't allow that either.
That's the trick. Yeah. I've definitely with friends been like, I love you. We've gone through this many times. And I've literally had this conversation, which isn't a fun conversation, but it's like, I need to start trusting that you're going to take care of this. And I still love you and we're still...
Yeah.
But we're not going to do this every day.
Yeah, it's that love and boundary, you know, which is like, I'm not going to hang out. I'm just not going to hang out with both of y'all because you guys always fight when we're together. And that's that like,
it doesn't change how much I love you.
It doesn't change how much I love you.
Yeah.
I have a limited amount of ways that I can spend my evenings and spend my time enjoying my life on this, you know, long march home. You know, like, I'm not going to spend it on all of these detours, you know, triaging this emotional stuff, but I love you no matter what, and go for it. As many times as you want to go there, as many lessons as you need to learn from your suffering, suffer as much as you want to until you're done, until you're fucking sick of suffering. And I'm going to love you the whole way.
Isn't that funny that it never stops until you're sick of it?
Yeah, you have to really get sick of it.
Wow. That's a really good, for me, big change in my life this year happened when I was tired of carrying other people's pain.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it anymore. And that's when I decided I needed to change.
My man. We did it.
Did we hit the record?
We set the record.
Is there music? Is there balloons? We need
3 more minutes to what? The record's 2:15?
Oh, we can do 3 minutes, bro.
Oh, we got 3 minutes
easy. You're like 3 minutes. I got 3 minutes. Okay.
You got 3 minutes all day. 3 minutes is no thing for you. Come on, bring us home. Bring us home, Big Alex.
This is big. Can I say something? I've never been called. I don't know if this is a good or bad thing. Because when I was young, I was always like the shortest in class. I was called like Little B or like.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a street rapper.
Little B. Little B. Only if it's L-I-L.
I was never big. Wow. Thank you, man.
Yeah, you're welcome, man.
Redoing my story on the Aubrey Marcus podcast. If you had to, we've pretty much like covered a lot of ground the past like few hours, but it feels like it's sort of like a reflection of where we both are in our lives today. What would you say is your biggest takeaway or reflection? And we'll both do it of the past couple hours. If you had to wrap a ribbon around what happened the past couple hours.
I think for me, whenever I'm around you, like I think there's
I don't know where this is going.
There's an essence of somebody, and then there's like the magic of somebody, and it like being around it and being able to experience it. Like one of the beauties of all these podcast conversations, actually any conversation with you, like it's a very present conversation, and that's like that to me is the best shit, right? But like the magic and is that courage to go out there and do it and be persistent. Because I've let a lot of situations go, even me, where I didn't have the confidence and I didn't have the courage to actually like go out there and put myself out there and be willing to risk rejection. And I've erred on the side of I'll just leave this. It's probably not meant to, I've still like, believe it or not, in the skew of things, like been too scared to do certain things that I know I should do. And that's something that coming away from any time I spend with you, it's like, no, man, just fucking do it. Like, do it, go for it, and like, it's okay to let it go at a certain point, like don't Warren Buffett myself. I learned that lesson too, but I err so far on the other side of like being so terrified of the Warren Buffetting of the situation in my own head, which is really not afraid of that. It's actually just a rationalization and an excuse not to go out there and be like,
because you have to be perfect, Audrey.
Yeah, exactly. I have to nail it. And I'm still afraid of some form of rejection, or still afraid of some form of denial, and it's like, and some idea that, I'm not quite worthy yet. I can't ask this podcast guest to be on my show because I'm not big enough yet. Even though like some part of me knows that, man, we would have a fucking dope conversation. But like, it'll happen when it happens, But like being with you,
it's such a good excuse. Like,
it's such a good
divine timing.
Exactly,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, right,
and I still squirm.
It will happen, but it won't happen until you ask.
And the divine timing is me being fucking ready to stand up and be like, no, I'm ready. Like, let's do this. It's going to be an amazing conversation.
Yes.
Like, listen, this is going to be incredible. We're going to sit down. We're going to blow people's minds. I would love to have you on the show, and like have somebody be like, okay. Yeah, fuck yeah.
Anyone will respond to that, by the way. That what you just did is it.
Yeah.
Which is just really believing that it's true. And someone else will be like, yeah, that sounds true.
Yep. That overwhelmingly, I learn that from you every time we hang out. And I learned that from you today.
Very kind of you, man. Thank you.
Yeah. For sure. It's true.
Thank you. If I had to put a bow on this, and I'm not doing this because you said something nice to me. I'm doing this because this is what I was going to say in the first place anyways. Every time I'm with you, and there's a few people, I can, you, InQ, Posner, there's a few people who have a cool combination in my life where I really admire and respect them, and I feel comfortable sharing the most shame-covered parts of myself. The only difference is with InQ and Posner, it's done in private. With you, it's done in front of, live on the podcast. Welcome to Aubrey's therapy session, where millions of people hear you talk about how shitty you are. It's like, no, but I think the reason it works with you is because you're not asking me to be that version of myself, you're with trepidation showing up like that. You don't even do it. When I look in your eyes, like I wish people could like be sitting here right now. The thing I like about you is when you share these things that are like a little not, not our best foot forward parts of our personalities that we're working on, that are works in progress. I don't even know if you would agree with this. When I see in your eyes, you're not that excited to be talking about it, but you do it because you know it's a gift to yourself to move through it, even though it's uncomfortable. No doubt. And every time you talk about those things and I look at you, I'm like, damn, he does not like that he's talking about this right now, which is much more, dude, it always scares me when someone's like, yeah, I do fucked up things. Yeah. And they like in their eyes, like they're just completely not there. And I'm like, oh God, they have no shame. They have no fear. I'm like, oh God,
it's like an inhuman. It's
right.
Like
they're almost they detached. They have detached themselves from the humanity of the growth in the experience. Mm-hmm. And it makes it a little less trustworthy for me personally. And like when I sit with you, you definitely, and it's something I relate to you with, is like, yes, this is a part about myself that's a work in progress. And still, I'm going to try.
Amen.
I love you, man.
I love you too, brother. Thank you, my friend. So good to see you as always. So fucking good. We set the amp record.
We did it.
We did it.
We did it.
Belt's coming your way. It's getting forged by Hephaestus himself.
I will
come out of the fires of Tartarus, and it will be a magical belt that you'll be able to carry. I will
pretend like I know what you're talking about. Thank you.
Greek mythology. Third Door, get that book. It's fucking amazing. Listen to our last podcast. Follow you on all the socials. Anything else you want to point people to before we get out of here?
I'm super grateful, man. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise, brother. Thanks, everybody. Peace.
Damn, that was wonderful.
That was awesome.
And I need to go. You have the stretch roller back roller?
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm going to get a massage after this.
Whoa, whoa.